recording now. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about Solidworks, Adept's integration within Solidworks and how to use the tools inside of Solidworks to find your files and work with your files that are now controlled by the Adept system. You are running Solidworks 2018, so we just loaded the client services in the task pane. You do not need to start the desktop client anymore. You can, if you wish, to start that. When you log into, when you start up SolidWorks 2018 for the first time, oh, by the way, I sent you a handout called Editing with SolidWorks, and hopefully you have a hard copy of that to take notes on. That's what we'll be following as our outline for today's presentation. In the top of that handout, we start talking about how Adept forms relationships between your files. So you'll create your SolidWorks part files and you use them in SolidWorks assembly files. So when Adept scans those files, it creates a parent-child relationship where the assembly is the parent and the part that you used in it is the child. Likewise, if you create a SolidWorks drawing file, you start a drawing file and then you insert the part or the assembly into the drawing. So therefore, when the parent-child relationship is the SolidWorks drawing, it's the parent of the part or the assembly. SolidWorks drawings are always the parents of the files. SolidWorks drawings are never children of an automatically extracted relationship. So whenever you're searching for things, if you want to find the drawing for it, you have to look at the Where Used tab to see where it's used to find the drawing files. Okay, so we've loaded the Adept plugin for SolidWorks. So when I start up SolidWorks for the first time after loading it, you'll get this message about settings are not correctly set. There are a couple of SolidWorks options that need to be turned on in order to work with Adept properly. So you just click on OK to dismiss that dialog, and then it'll get you, it'll start up SolidWorks.
Last time we decreased the resolution to make things bigger.
Okay. Hey Todd, real quick, I'm going to adjust the screen resolution.
Okay.
Sorry. It's just really hard for people to see. Try this one.
That's better.
Oh, we got a little bit. This one. That one.
You went smaller. You went the wrong direction. I think you had it right before.
You had a by 960.
No, what you just did, and then you undid it. Nope.
This is the 1280 by 960.
When
13.
The bottom one.
Keep changes. You can go smaller if you want. Nope, you just went the wrong direction.
I was trying to make it fill the whole screen.
No, don't go any smaller than that because the task pane won't show up. You need at least the 960 vertical.
Okay.
Don't go any smaller than that in the vertical because otherwise you don't have enough room for the task pane.
So hit the drop down again.
You can go up to the 1024 if you want.
Well, we don't need the 1024. You want. You keep.
I think that's as good as we're going to get without getting too small. All right, sorry, Todd.
Okay. So is that resolution better for you?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're going to do here is you'll see this dialog come up for logging into the task pane. You can hit cancel if you want on that. We'll come back to that in a minute. And then, so it starts up SolidWorks. And over here on the SolidWorks task pane, you'll notice that there's a new icon added for the Adept part of it. The Adept task pane does load itself inside of the SolidWorks task pane. So to set the options correctly, first what we do is we come in here to our tools options. And we'll come down here to performance. And on the performance tab, the option that needs to be turned on for Adept is this no preview during open. You just simply check that one. On the external references tab, the option that needs to be turned on to work with Adept is don't prompt to save read-only reference documents, discard changes. You're going to be working with a lot of read-only files. Anything you don't have checked out is going to be opened as a read-only file, so you don't want to have it prompting to save those files. Those are the two that must be turned on.
Where's that second one?
External references.
External references.
And which one do we switch?
Don't prompt to save rate.
Second one from the second from the top.
That's not on the package, right?
It's in the handout on page 3. Oh, I'm sorry. Wrong option. Actually, it looks like I'm a little out of order of what my handout is written up for. It's on page 6. Sorry about that. I got the settings the opposite way. I thought I had these first, and then I had the Adept options.
Yeah,
I have it on page 5.
All right.
Tools, options required.
Yes.
Yeah, page 5.
Okay.
Okay. And then down here, those are the two that are required. Under the collaboration, the enable multi-user environment should be turned off as well. And then we will talk about the whole wizard and toolbox, how to get that set up, but that's not set up yet. So we'll come back to the whole wizard and toolbox, and I'll show you how to configure that to work with how toolbox is being set up in your system. So those are the SolidWorks options that need to be set. You should also see, if you go into the tools add-ins, you should see that there is 2 new add-ins that were put in here. And they are the Adept integration for SolidWorks 2018 and the Adept task pane for SolidWorks 2018. Those should be turned on both sides here. And if you have PDM workgroups loaded, you need to make sure that the PDM workgroups is turned off.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we don't use PDM.
Okay. Okay, now let's go back to page 3 of your handout to start setting up the Adept options. Sorry about the misorder there. So here's our Adept task pane. We canceled out of the dialog for configuring it when we were logging in. I said we'll come back to it. So here's the Adept task pane. If you go to the file and log in, you'll get that screen back again. Now, the first thing we have to do is we have to configure a data source. So this is page 4 of the handout. At least on my handout, it's page 4. Evidently, the page numbers are off a little bit.
Page 2.
So we hit our configure button here, and we have to add a data source. You can give it any name that you want to give it. Do you have a preference to what name you want to give this data source? Okay.
What is this? Hey, Todd,
Yes.
what are we doing?
We're configuring the connection to the Adept server.
So this is a one-time,
This is a one-time thing. And the reason we have this is because you could have, like if you have a sandbox environment and a production environment, you would have 2 data sources, one to log into the sandbox, one to log into the production. Most companies only have one data source, which is to log into the production. And as I say, you can give it any name that you want. Like here, they would call it production and sandbox. Or if you only have one, you might call it Adept, or your company name, or whatever you want to call it. And every user can call it different if they want to. Okay, so we're going to call it AdeptDB. In the server, we need to get the server name of where we're logging into. So let me come over here and I can get the server name from here. And
any of this pertinent to us, Ernie?
Not really.
Right now?
No. Brant or I will do this on your machine.
okay, so it's going to be this Adept, I think it says Adept01.
Yeah, 01.
Okay, so the server here will be, I'm assuming your web server is the same as your,
The web server and Adept server are on the same machine.
okay. So you want to put in your Adept server or your web server here. In this, if they are different. And did you configure it with secure FTP or secure
Yeah.
HTTP? So it's just standard, no secure connection. Did you change the port number for your web server?
No.
No.
Okay, so that's all you need to fill out there. So the only thing this is doing is it's creating, when you pick it, it's creating this URL address of where to log into. Okay, and then up here you want to type in your, whoever we're logged into the desktop here as. Since we have the desktop running, we have to log in with the same login ID in both the desk pane and on the same machine. So that's, you can run both at the same time, but they must be logged in as the same user because they use it uses one license. And when you're done, you just click on OK, and that logs you into the Adept database. As I say, you do not need to have the desktop client running in order to launch this. This runs by itself without the desktop running, but you can use both if you want. And that loads the Adept task pane. It loads it inside here, the SolidWorks task pane window. You can resize it accordingly here by dragging and dropping. There are 2 window heights. There are 2 modes for the task pane. There's what we call Cad mode, and in Cad mode it has your search at the top, and then it has your results in the middle, and then it has your document dashboard part at the bottom. And you can resize these windows by all 3 of these windows by dragging and dropping and moving things around to get it however you want it to look. Okay, so that's Cad mode. There's this little double arrow up here that if you hit it, it will expand it. And if you expand it to where it's wider than it is high, it changes it into what we call desktop mode. And in desktop mode, you have your search stuff over here. Your results are over to the right of it. and then your document dashboard is at the bottom. So you can use it inside of the CAD application. You can drag it off to another screen and make it desktop mode so that you can read the document dashboard more better. And you can control the width with this arrow up here if you have it docked in the CAD application. Okay, so we're going to be running in CAD mode here. And in CAD mode, as I said, you can resize these windows accordingly, but I want to get where I can have all of this at the top and I have a fairly decent results window. As I said, the vertical here, you want to have at least, you want to have the vertical here to be at least like 900 or whatever, so that you can get enough room for all three windows here. Okay, so that covers page 4 as far as configuring the data source. Now, there are some user options that need to be set. Under the Tools ribbon here, if you click on the button, it'll show the ribbon. If you click on the arrow, it'll resize the windows accordingly so that your ribbon is always being displayed. So under the Tools ribbon, you can go to get some user options. Click on the button here for the user options, and that brings up the Adept user options for the task pane.
We're in page 3 and 4 now.
Okay, on the first tab here, if you have multiple Adept task panes for like SolidWorks, AutoCAD, Inventor, the first page here is for all the task panes. The second page will be the CAD specific options. So, stop ad options. These control the viewer. If you have various features being used in your files, like in AutoCAD, if you use overlays, in SolidWorks, if you have in-context references, in Inventor, if you have substitute references, in MicroStation, if you have nesting references in there. When you're opening the files in the viewer, it doesn't need to get any of the files below that level in order to view the file properly in the viewer. So we have these options in here to stop building the references at that level, rather than putting into the virtual library all these other children references that aren't needed to view the file. I recommend they're left on, but we do have some clients out there that they want those extra files put in the virtual library, so they can turn them off if they want to. So it's recommended that all of these are left on. The path to the virtual library in the task pane is not the same as the path to the virtual library in the desktop client. There are two different paths. So this is the path of where you're going to be putting the files in the virtual library for the task pane. The default location is My Documents, Adept VL. You can move it if you want to. So on a particular computer, the path is this path. If you're logged into Windows, because we're putting it under My Documents, if you're logged into Windows, every user that logs into the task pane on that machine will put it in the same area if you're logged into Windows as the same user, because it's under My Documents. If you log into Windows with different usernames, each user's virtual library is going to be different based on their Windows login. If you move this out to like C:/ whatever and put it out to root, then it's the same for every user that logs into the task pane on that machine. So there is, unlike the desktop client where every user that logs into Adept has their own virtual library, in the task pane there is only one common virtual library for whoever logs into the task pane. And it's, because it's under My Documents, it's based on who you log into Windows as. And then there's also the path of where is your default work, where your work area is going to be put. So you can set the path here to your where your files are going to be kept. Okay. When you're putting in search values here to search for criteria, if you want that saved, whatever the last criteria you had, if you want that saved from session to session, you would just put a checkbox in here to save the search values. Okay, if you don't want it saved, then just leave it unchecked. By default, go ahead.
Todd,
Yep.
well, can you say that again? What if you want what save?
This search value over here, when you're
Okay.
filling in criteria for, say, if every day I want to come in and I want to perform a search for all the files that start with 1. Well, if my last search of the day was putting in a 1 here for the file name, and I exit SolidWorks, the next day when I come in, that 1 will be there, ready for you to hit the search button. But it only
Okay.
saves whatever the very last criteria is that you use to search on. So there's, you can't save like default criteria.
But if you turn that flag on and all your searches are saved?
No, just the last one.
Oh, that flag only saves your last search.
Yeah, it saves the values that you had in here for your last search of the evening.
Until right, for last search until you like log off your desktop or turn off your desktop, right?
Well, tomorrow, whatever you put in here and searched on, when you close SolidWorks, you turn off your desktop, come in the next day, turn on your desktop and start up SolidWorks. If this is checked, that criteria will automatically appear here as soon as you start up SolidWorks.
The last search of the day, of the previous day.
The day. Okay.
So that's what that saved search value is. The next one, clear virtual library on login. As I said, the virtual library for the task pane is different than the virtual library for the desktop client. So if you turn this on, it will clear the virtual library that you have set up here for the task pane. It will not do anything with the desktop client virtual library. If you turn this off, it will leave the files in this location here. So this option is best if it's turned on to keep your system nice and clean. But if you're working on large assemblies and you're going to work on them for several weeks at a time or several days at a time, then you might want to turn this off, because every time you close down SolidWorks, it will clear the virtual library. You'll close down SolidWorks, you'll start up SolidWorks and log in, it'll clear the virtual library. So if you're working on a really large assembly that a lot of the files are not checked out yet, they're coming from the Adept library. When you're opening that file, it's going to pull all those files that aren't checked out into this virtual library location, and then open them from that virtual library location. So if you have a 2,000 part assembly and you have 10 of those files checked out to your work area to work on, that means that 1,990 of those files are getting put into the virtual library in order to open.
So does that make sense for you guys?
No.
Okay. So you can make a decision to check out as many or as few of the sub parts of an assembly as you want. So if you know that the change that you need to make is rearrangement. All the same components, and you don't have to modify any of the components. You just have to change the arrangement of the components. You will check out the assembly, the top level assembly, but you're not going to check out any of the children because you're not going to make any changes to those children. But obviously SolidWorks needs them. So what it does is it takes those children and it kind of moves them into this virtual library. Okay. Now what he's also adding in is that depending upon whether or not you do this from the actual Adept client or if you do it from inside of SolidWorks, the Adept tab, the virtual library is a different place on your actual computer. So kind of seamless to you. You're not gonna see those things. But even though you're only gonna rearrange the top level assembly, it still needs to have a virtual copy of all the files, and it's gonna put it in the virtual library. If you have this set to clear your virtual library on login, but day after day after day, it's going to take you a week to do that rearrangement, then every time you log into SolidWorks, it's got to pull all those files. If you leave this turned off, then all those files will already be there the next time you go to log in.
If you leave it off or on?
Off, because it says clear.
It. Right.
It says clear the library on login.
Right.
So if that's turned on, it's going to clear the library when you log in, and then when you open up the assembly, it's going to copy those files back.
Now, if you have that on the way it is now, you log in the next day, that's blank. Is there a drop down and just pick the same one? Or do you have to remember that and type that in every time?
Pick what same one?
On the push, on the path to the Adept virtual.
You never have to change that.
Right, but if it's off, if it's clear, there's nothing in it when you log in, right?
It doesn't clear the path.
Is there a drop down that you just pick the one you want again? Or do you have to?
No, you never have, we're going to set this up once and you never have to touch that again.
Okay, maybe I'm not making myself clear.
The path thing stays the same. Whatever's in that path, that will always stay there.
I thought you said that if that was checked.
No, that, whatever
When
goes
you come
into
in-
that path, whatever.
That's just
the
like
file that
a
goes in
shortcut to a folder.
General setting. It's not per document.
Okay, then just bear with me for 2 seconds. If that is checked, when you shut down SolidWorks, you come in the next day, that path is blank. Is that correct?
No, hold on. The path is not blank. The contents of that path
Oh, okay.
is blank.
No,
But the path stays the same. It's going to still be there. It's just going to be empty. Okay.
So I have a question then. So sounds like it actually makes a copy, right, of all the children files into the path that you give it. If someone else is working on one of those child parts, you're not going to see that on your assembly, correct?
Okay.
Because you're just working on a copy of something prior to having.
Well, you're never working on a copy, and you're never going to actually copy the files out. What you'll do is anything you want to modify, you perform a checkout, and that takes and checks it out to whatever your work area you're working in. And we'll over here are the work areas, and we'll talk about those later. So when you check files out, it takes a file from the Adept library, copies it to that work area, and changes the flag inside of the Adept database to status of out. So it shows that that file is currently out to somebody to be worked on. Any files that are out to people, you can still get to those files in the library, but you can't get to the one in their work area. So you can't get to the file that they're working on. You can only get to the last one that Adept is aware of. So you only want to check out whatever you're actually going to work on. Everything else you're going to leave in. Now, when you open that assembly, any file that's out, Adept's integration is going to repath to the work area and path it to the file that's in your work area. Any file that isn't checked out, Adept's going to see, oh, I need this file because it's part of this assembly, but it isn't checked out. Adept is going to automatically go up to the library and put a copy, a read-only copy of that file into this virtual library area. So it's going to get the latest and greatest one from the library and put it into this virtual library folder.
So does that enable, like we have a library that multiple users are picking parts from, and different users are just making different assembly level models, but they're not changing the individual part models? Can you check out just the assembly and then check out copies of the parts so that multiple people can be working from the same parts with different assemblies? You physically do not copy out the files from Adept. If you do, you're going to be relating your assembly to the copied file in your work area, and then if you delete it, it's going to break the relationship. So you never ever copy out files unless you actually want to copy it out to make a change to the file name. It's like my question is can multiple people be working on different assemblies that use the same parts?
Only the person that has it checked out can actually modify that part. Anybody else is going to have a read-only version that Adept is going to put in a copy in the virtual library for them. You don't physically have to copy it out. Adept will do that as you're opening the file.
Okay.
Okay, and to follow up, so if someone goes in there and checks out one of the parts that someone else is using on an assembly, you said once they check it back in, Adept automatically updates the virtual library of everyone else using that part in this? Oh.
No, not automatically. It will automatically if you close and reopen your assembly. But while you have the assembly open, you're working on the copied out version of the file. And if somebody else checks out that file, makes a change to it and checks it back in, there are methods for you to go and get those files if you need them right away. But otherwise, you're still working on your copied out version of the file. You close your assembly. The next day when you open it, or the next time you open it, Adept will see that your version in your virtual library isn't up to date, and it will download the new one and open it with the new one.
Okay.
If you have this option turned off, then what Adept says is, okay, when I log into Adept, don't first delete all of those files in that virtual area. Leave them there. So that way when I open up the assemblies, it sees, oh, I already have them in my virtual library. I don't need to re-download them from the Adept database. Or it may see that 10 of them have changed because other users checked them out and modified them. So it downloads the 10 new ones that it needs to the virtual library only. The rest of them are left as is. Now, the reason we do it at login is because we have plenty of clients that need to go out on the road. So they'll check out whatever they need to modify while they're out on the road, open it once with the integration running so it populates the virtual library. Then they'll log out of Adept. They'll set their options in Solidworks that they're not using the Adept task pane or anything, and they'll disconnect from the network. They'll go out on the road. They'll be able to open those assemblies because everything's either in their work area or in the virtual library already. Okay? The next time they plug back into the network and log back into Adept, that's when it will clear the virtual library. So the virtual library is once you open something with the integration running, the files are either being accessed from your work area or from the virtual library. You're no longer going up to the server. So if your work areas are local and your virtual library is local, that means you can open files without having to log into the network. The one exception to that will be toolbox items. Because toolbox items, the way you're getting set up with toolbox is you will always have to be connected to the network to open up the toolbox items.
So this is good for people that are remote or on the road, and that's the main advantage.
So it's also advantageous for people that are connecting from their homes through VPN. As it downloads the stuff to the virtual library, and then from that point on, they don't need the VPN connection unless they need to check out or check in something. So we'll talk more about the virtual library again later. It's just here's the option of, do you want to clear that on login or not? We recommend it's left on because that way every time you log in, we're deleting all those temp files and cleaning off your hard drive. If you turn this off, it means that Adept is not automatically going to ever clear the virtual library. So that means if you log in today and open up a file that has revision 1 of this part being put into the virtual library, and during the day somebody checked that out, made changes to it, and checked it back in, and now it's at revision 2, if you have this turned off, the next time you open that assembly, Adept's going to see, oh, I need revision 2 of that part now. I only have revision 1. It's going to download revision 2, but it's not going to delete revision 1. So it's not going to use it anymore, but the revision 1 is still going to be on your system. So as you're going throughout the course of a year or whatever, Adept's going to put into the virtual library, but never, ever, ever delete it. Think of it as like your temporary internet files. You go out to a web page, when you open up that web page, it has to download all the images that are on that web pages and all the menu items and all these various things that are on that web page someplace, and it puts it in the temporary internet files. Tomorrow, if you open up that same web page, that stuff's all in your temporary internet file, so it opens faster. It only has to download stuff that has changed since the day before. It's like all the graphics and everything that haven't changed are there already, so it opens faster again now. If and as you're going, it keeps putting in and putting in and putting in, and your hard drive gets full. So now what's the first thing you do? You go in and clean out your temporary internet files to get rid of all that junk that's in there that you're not using anymore. Well, the virtual library is the same thing. If we set it to automatically clear every time you log in, but if you turn that off so that way your system runs faster, we're going to put in, and eventually it's going to fill up your hard drive that you have to clear it manually. And I'll show you where the buttons are to clear the virtual library manually. The last option here, that should be left off, the Use Watcher. The Watcher program is a help desk tool, and they'll tell you when to turn it on and when to leave it off. Over here, the available search fields, by default, they are all turned on. You can go in, if you don't want them to appear in the drop-down, when you click on the drop-down, if you don't want certain fields to ever appear in that drop-down, you can go in and turn them off if you want to. And then they won't appear in that drop-down until you come back in here and turn them back on. If you always want to see all the fields that you're allowed to get to, just leave this set to all, leave all of these checkboxes on. These are once and done options that you set, and they're good for all the task panes, all the web-based task panes. If you go to the SolidWorks tab, these are specific to SolidWorks. Set default directory to the current work area. As you're switching work areas, you're actually telling SolidWorks that, hey, I'm working in this folder now, or I'm switching over to a different work area, so I'm working in this folder now. If you turn this option on, it automatically sets like the file open command in SolidWorks to go to whatever your current active work area is. If you switch work areas, then file open will point you to the different one. If you leave this off, the file open in SolidWorks is going to go to some place on your network, and you're going to have to browse to get to your work area location. Enable inquiry status. The inquiry status, I'm going to turn it on here so I can show you what it does. If you have an assembly open, so I took that 2,000 part assembly, I checked it out, I checked out like 100 parts that are in there that I'm going to work on. The other 100 parts are still in the library that other users can check out and modify if they want to. You can always do a refresh references to update your assembly with the latest and greatest of what's in the Adept database. But as I said, if nobody has changed any of those parts, you don't have to do that refresh references. You already have opened whatever's the latest and greatest. So there's an inquiry status that we put in as an option to turn on or not, because if you turn it on, it does make opening the assembly take longer. As you're opening the assembly, what it does is once it's finished opening the assembly, it reads what you have opened and puts into memory on your computer the file name, the Adept version of the file, what the status is. It puts various key features into memory on your computer that when you click on the inquiry status button, it checks what it has in memory with what's in the database currently. And if any of them are different, then it shows you that, hey, this file has been modified by another user. And then you can say, okay, I need to see that file right now so I can hit my refresh references, or, okay, I know it's been modified, I don't need to see it right now, I can wait until I close and reopen the assembly and not hit the refresh references. If you turn this off, the only way you can tell if something has changed is by going in and hitting refresh references and having Adept come back and say, no, I didn't have to update anything. During that process of refreshing references, it does force you to save your assembly as it is right now and everything else. So inquiry status is just a faster way to find out if something that you have currently open has been updated by another user. If that's not all that important of data to you, you can turn this off, and that way the assemblies will open faster because it doesn't have to put into memory all that information. Enable extract on save. We recommend this is left on. And what that means is every time you hit the save button in SolidWorks, Adept will perform an extraction of that file to keep the data card up to date. It'll extract all the metadata that you're extracting to the fields on the data card. It'll extract all the parent-child relationships and update all of that stuff. If you turn this option off, it means that Adept will get stale as you hit File Save in SolidWorks. You're hitting File Save, it'll save the file. Adept will not extract it, so Adept's data will get stale. When you go to check in that file, Adept will perform an extraction at that point. When you switch work areas, Adept will perform an extraction at that point. So there are times Adept will eventually catch up to it again before it gets checked back into the library. But we put this in as an option because we had some clients out there that had really large assemblies that they saved on a regular basis. And they said every time they hit the save, because of Adept extracting, it took an extra 20 seconds or 30 seconds to save the file. And that was taking too much of their day up. So we put this in as an option for those types of clients to turn it off if they want to, so that way it makes the file save go back to what it was before they put in Adept with SolidWorks there. Enable auto refresh of the Adept relationship tree. I'm going to be showing you the Adept relationship tree during the training today and tomorrow. And by default, it does not build that tree when you open up your assembly. You have to click on a button to build that tree. If you want it to build the tree automatically as soon as you open your assembly, you can turn this option on and it will build that tree automatically. It does mean, turning it on does mean that it will take longer to open files, because as soon as it's done opening it, it'll have to go in and build that Adept relationship tree. So you can decide if you want to turn this on or off. I tend to leave it off because it's as simple as clicking on one button to build that tree. So I just build it when I need to use the tree. These options can be changed at any time while you're working in SolidWorks, but they will not become enabled. Whatever you change, do not become active until you actually open up a new, until you close everything and open up a new assembly. So you can change them whenever you want, and if you want them to become active right away, close all your assemblies and then start opening things back up again and they become active. Say okay to that. And usually you don't have to go in and change them. You set them once and forget them. And they're individual user options, so they are not global options. They do not follow you around from system to system. Okay. Now, all of those things are things you only have to do once. You only have to configure your data source once. You only have to configure your options once. You don't have to change the SolidWorks options more than once. Okay. Under the help menu here, if you want to find out what version you're using, you go to Help About, and it'll tell you what version of the plugin stuff that you're using. Okay, now, your main avenue of finding files, and we're going to skip the Adept Task Pane SolidWorks 2016 and 17 because you're running SolidWorks 2018. So we're going to skip ahead to I'm going to be skipping ahead to where it says Adept Task Pane SolidWorks 2018. On mine, it's page 16.
I got.
That is correct. You're not I was told you're running SolidWorks 2018 only. You're not running multiple versions of SolidWorks, correct?
Right.
Okay. Okay, so the task pane, this will be your avenue to find your files. If you come up to the SolidWorks and say File Open, you're not going to be able to browse out and find your files anywhere in here because they're all going to be contained in the Adept Vault, and there's no way for you to browse out and find those files in any way, shape, or form that aren't checked out to your work area. So from the Adept task pane, you'll be able to find all of your files that are put into the system. The task pane is divided into 3 areas here. We have our search area, we have our results area, and then we have our document dashboard area. We already talked about how to configure the data source to log into Adept, and we've already talked about the options. So in the search area, the browse area, by default, it comes up with a criteria here of just the file name. You can add additional, unlike the desktop client where you have a whole search card that you can pick and add fields to. In the task pane, when we talk to CAD users, they always said, we always use the same fields for doing our searches. So we divide a grid up here where you just put in the fields that you're interested in searching for. So file name is one that most people use for their criteria. Come in, click on the drop down, you'll see all of your fields in your database, and you can pick on whatever field you want. You can scroll and pick on them, or you can just start typing and it will drop you to that area of the grid that you can just pick it that way. Okay, it looks like you have a field for extra. Whatever field you add here will be there the next time you log in. So if you always use the same fields, you can set this up once and leave those fields alone. Log out, log in, they'll be there the next day, etc. So you put in the fields that you want to search on, and as I said, it will remember that criteria. The top one is the only one that's a little bit different. In the top one, if you click on the drop down, there's extra fields in there for current card or for doing a full text search. So only the top field is the one where you can do current card or full text. If you do one of those, it grays out all the criteria below it. It doesn't delete it, it just grays it out for you to do a search of the current card or to do a full text search. And then if you want to, you can come back in and switch it back to file name. And once you do that, it will it'll reactivate the other criteria that you have below it. So whatever criteria you put in there, it remembers it for that machine, and it resets it every time you log into the same criteria you had when you exited SolidWorks. Over in the search values here, you can put in what you want to look for using all the same wildcards that you can in the desktop client, with the exception of the question mark. Okay,
the question mark was the single character wildcard?
Yes.
Okay.
That question mark, the question mark character doesn't work in this version of the web browser. So since you can't use it in the web browser, you can't use it in the web-based task pane either. It's my understanding it is in the next release, it is the question mark search is going to be accessible again.
but for right now in this version, question mark doesn't work. Asterisk does, but question mark doesn't. So if I want to find everything where the file name starts with 1, I just simply come up here and type in a number 1. Adept always assumes an asterisk is at the end of whatever you're typing, unless you're using one of the other wildcards. Search, right click, so search key. So if you're using one of these wildcards at one of these at the bottom here in the first, then it does not assume an asterisk at the end. But as long as you're not using one of these wildcards, it does assume an asterisk is at the end of whatever you're typing. I'm going to just put in a 1. It's going to find me everything where the file name starts with 1. I hit my search button, and it finds all my files that begin with 1. And it looks like there's, I have a hard time reading that, 250 plus thousand files in there. Okay, so it's fairly quick in doing the searches, and when it brings it back, at the present time, it's bringing back 25 results at a time, because my page count here is set to 25. And that's what makes the searches go fast, because you're only bringing back 25 records at a time. You can switch this page count to 50, to 100, to 250, to 500, to 1,000. So once you switch it, it'll stay switched until you switch it again. So if I want to bring back more than 25 at a time, say I want to bring back 100 at a time, and switch this to 100, and now my number of pages is at 3 now instead. So now I'm bringing back 100 results at a time. So that's my search button is for. You put in the criteria, hit search, and bring back that result set. And this is all your files. It's not just SolidWorks files. So it's PDFs and Word documents and images and everything.
Can you see a preview in here somewhere?
If you're on the search field here, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, on this one tab here, on the search tab, you can do a show thumbnails and search results, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And down here in the document dashboard, if you switch to the thumbnail tab, you can see the thumbnail if there is a thumbnail for that file. You'll see the thumbnail down here.
Great.
But not until you actually click on it.
Right.
Okay. So I searched for everything and found everything that started with 1. If I want to find everything that starts with 1 or it starts with 2, I can hit my clear button here, and I can come up and put in the new criteria of 2. And I don't want to do a new search. Instead, what I want to do is I want to do a new search and add it to my already existing search. So that's an append search. Do an append search, and it's going to find me everything that starts with 1 or starts with 2, and have that in the results area down here. Again, I'm only displaying 100 records at a time. Evidently, you have a lot of files that start with 2.
Todd, while we're waiting on that, we keep getting some like interference on the phone. Are you hearing that too?
No, I'm not.
I don't know what is. Are you using your computer for the audio or a phone?
I'm using a computer.
Yeah, I wonder if that's what it is. I mean, it's bearable, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we just keep getting this. It's bearable. We can continue, but we keep getting interference.
Okay.
And I know earlier in the week with Eric, we had to switch Eric from computer to telephone at one point.
Yeah, it's hard for me to work with my telephone because I don't have a headset for my telephone.
Okay.
So that's why I use the computer, so I have a headset. But
Okay.
I mean, if I have to, I'll switch over to speakerphone for the phone. If
All right,
I
well,
have to switch it to the phone.
We're good for right now.
yeah, we're good for
Okay.
right now. We can continue.
Okay.
So what just happened? It was searching and then,
It says no records found.
oh, it says no records found.
And I wasn't paying. I wasn't paying attention to what happened here. So let me go in and start this over again. I'll do a search for everything that starts with 1. Hit my search. Hit my clear button here. Do everything that starts with 2 and do an append search. Okay, and that adds them both together. So now I have my 1s and my 2s down here displaying 100 records at a time. And I went from 3 pages up to 5 pages of results.
Why did it wipe it out before? I mean,
I don't know. I wasn't watching what was happening.
Todd,
Yes.
the second window down where your cursor is,
Yeah.
up where it says records, 1, 2, that there, up higher, right there. When you did your last search, that said no records found.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what happened that it got to that state. I wasn't watching what was happening as it was doing that second search. I know that second search took a lot of time for some reason,
it
and
really was.
I really don't know what happened there. So this is what should have happened when I do a search for everything that starts with 1, and then I do a second search for everything that starts with 2 and append it to it. Now, if I want to search within, then what I can do is say I want to search within this for everything that starts with 1 or starts with 2 and has IN in the file name somewhere. These 2 letter combinations. I can hit my clear button, go up here and do my asterisk IN. And I don't want to do a new search for that. I don't want to add to my search for that. Instead, I want to look within my already previous result set. So I want to refine it. And that's going to search for everything in here. Now I have everything that starts with 1 or starts with 2 and has IN in the file name. And I'm down to 1 page of results now. So everything fits on this 1 page of results. It starts with 1 or 2 and has IN in it somewhere. Okay, so that's searching the database for a new search. Append is adding to your already existing search. Refine is refining your existing search, making it smaller. And the clear button just clears the values up here. Okay. So that's on the search tab. You'll notice that you have all these other tabs that you can use down here as well. So if you want to find things by way of looking through the folder structure that you're used to looking through in the network, that's the library browser. If you go to library browser, you'll see your vault. Under your vault, you'll have your folders that were in the vault. Under those, you will have your subfolders that were in those folders. So this is basically how are the folders defined in your vault in Adept. So you can look for files that way. Click on them, and it will bring you back all the files that are in that folder.
And can you do a search for files just within that folder?
That's what I'm doing here.
Question was, can we search just within a certain library folder?
Yes, you can. And you do that with library sets. Okay, so if you if you come over here to the, let's see. Actually, you can't.
And while it may or may not be possible, but I'm curious as to why you think you'd want to.
Just to help refine the search, like if we knew the document were in the engineering folder, we don't need to search. We don't need to pull up all the documents in order entry. And
So here's the library folder, as
Here-
one of
here's-
your search.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was one of your search criteria. That's how you would have to do it in the task pane. Here's your library folder. You would have to browse out, pick your folder that you want to search in, and set that as one of your criteria here. And now you can search for files, other metadata in that one library only. Now, if you happen to have in your libraries, if you pick like library name, you have to watch, because if you pick like library name, the library name isn't just the folder. The library name is like this whole thing here. Like this library name here would not just be customer transmittals. It would be project/customer transmittals as the library name. Okay, so that's what's meant
Like if you
here.
get dropped, you can get there just by clicking on it there, right? That will make that.
Right, you can get to it just by clicking on it there. But that the various things down here, you have library folder, and you have library name. Okay, the library name is whatever the name is when your administrator defined that library. And with the scan directory and everything, basically the library name matches the library path with the scan directory. So there's different things here. Watch which one you pick when you're picking library. Library folder is just the folder name. Library name is whatever's put into the name field when you're defining that library. And library path is the whole path to where that library is being found in the vault. Library ID is something you're probably never ever going to use, because that's the GUID that Adept assigns to that library. But again, whichever one of these you pick, when you click on the ... here and pick it in the tree here, it's going to put the right one in there. So that's how you would search if you only want to search one library.
Now, on the training we had on Monday, the searches were stored. Like, if you do one search and then you do another search, a different search, there was like a historical tree.
Right?
Is that still good in the plugin?
No. Okay, so we have the library browser, which allows you to view the file. We have the Save Searches tab here, that only the last search is available to you. But if it's one you want to save, you can right-click on here. Here's my last search. You can right-click on it and you can save it as a saved search. But it does not show you the last search and the search before that and the search before that and the save. So if you want to save them, physically save them so that you can come back to them, yes, you can do a save search as and give it a name so that you can physically come back to it if you want to. But it doesn't keep listing them here as last search, previous search, previous search, previous search, like it does in the desktop client.
Okay.
So as long as you do a save search as, then you can come back to it if you want to. Likewise, in the desktop client, you can save searches as well. Any files that were saved in the desktop client, you can search on here, because these training ones were created in the desktop client during your training. If somebody creates a search and shares it with you, all of those ones that are shared with you will be available here as well.
Okay.
Okay. So things you do in the desktop client and save are available, but it doesn't pull up like the desktop client does, where it saves every search in your session. Until you actually log out of Adept and log back in, it doesn't, it keeps saving all those searches that you can go back to any one of them. Here, if you want to go back to them, you have to save them. Okay, So we did the search tab, we did the library browser tab, we did the save searches tab. The work area tab shows you all of your current active work areas. Okay, so all of your work areas that you have defined will be shown here. If you want to add a new work area, you can right click here and say add a work area. But you can only add work areas on map drive letters. Okay, so you can browse out here, but you notice I don't have the network. I can't browse out to the network. So you can, if you want to browse out, it has to be a map drive letter. And that is put in already to fix that in a future version of Adept, to where you can browse out to the network. But as of right now, that's if you want to use network work areas, you have to have a map drive letter so you can get to them and pick them from here. Or you have to open up the desktop client and define it in the desktop client. And once you define it in the desktop client, it's available over here. You just can't define it new over here in the task pane. Okay. Likewise, I can't come in here and just type. I can't delete this and type anything. I can highlight it, but I can't change it. Okay, if you have favorites, if you have saved favorites lists in the desktop client, they're available over here. So you can go in and find your favorites list that you've created or have been shared with you. Okay, if you want to create a new favorites list, you can create a new favorites list here. You can rename an existing favorites list, and you can delete a favorites list.
Now, Todd, the favorites could be files, could be searches, or whatever you want it to be.
The favorites, I think, can only be files, records. So it's, you search for criteria and you add records to a favorites list.
It can be more than one file.
It can be more than one file, yes. So yeah, you can't put a whole search in a favorites list. That would be a saved search, not a favorites list. But you can do a search and then select all the files that search returned and put that into a favorites list. You understand the difference between that?
Yeah.
A search is dynamic and it can change all the time. Every time you run it, it could bring you back different results. A favorites list, once you run it, it brings you back the same results every time. Okay. If you want to use a file guide, click on the File Guide tab and you will find all of your file guides. Now, file guides are simply metadata. It is something that looks like a folder structure, but instead of actually using physical folders, it's using various metadata fields to make a pseudo folder structure. So like this one is customer, job number, and then file type. So the top field is my customer field, the next field down is my job number field, and the bottom one is my file type field. And it's using those three pieces of metadata to put a result set together. Okay, so that's a file guide, and those are set up by your administrator as to how they will be displayed. And the last tab here is your inbox. And these are files that are have been assigned to you, or out to you, or on a status of review to you. So you can only display your inbox. Over in the desktop client, when you go to inbox, you can add other users' inboxes here. You can only display your own inbox, and that's it. You can't see other users' inboxes. So that's all these tabs that you have at the bottom here. And if you right-click on that bottom bar there, you can display them on the top. You can display them on the bottom. You can display them in a straight line, in a single line. And then you have your scroll bar here to get to all of them. And if there's certain ones that you will never ever use, you can turn them off. So if I will never use favorites, I can turn that tab off. If I decide I want to use it, I can turn it back on. The only ones you cannot turn off are the search tab and the work area tab. All the rest of them you can turn off if you want to. When you log into the task pane, there is no default work area set. Okay, so until you actually come to the work area tab and pick a work area, there is no actual default work area. So if you right click on files and say check out, you'll have to click a drop down and pick the work area if there's no default work area. Once a work area has been defined, now if you go in and you right click on something and say check out or copy out, down here it will have your default work area in there. But until you do that, until you actually physically pick a work area within a given session, this doesn't know what work area you want to check it out to, and you have to click on the drop down and pick one. So there's certain things that don't work until you go and get a work area and pick a work area. Not too many though. Okay, so that's how you'll find your files to work with them. Okay, I want to do an is parent. I'm going to put up the field of is parent because I'm going to want to find a parent assembly to work with. Is parent true, and I will do start. I'm going to find a SolidWorks assembly. Okay, so here's an assembly that has quite a few children, so I'll work with that one. So I've done my search, I've gotten my results set back. Now in my results area here, as I said, there is the drop down here for how many records I want to display per page. Once you set that, it's set to that until you change it. The page count here, 1 to 3, means I got 3 pages of results that I can look at. The record number up here, it's telling me how many total records I'm getting in that search. The column headers here. If I get file name, library status, owner as the default columns, I can right click on here and I can add columns to that if I want. I can remove columns. Certain columns I can't remove, like I can't remove file name. If I have column sets defined already, I can use an Adept column set. And if I'm on the search tab, there's this last right click option here of show thumbnails in search results. It's only available on the search tab, but if I click on that, it's going to take longer to bring back my results, because in addition to bringing back my results, it's actually downloading a thumbnail image of it as well. So is that something you think you would use? Notice how high the rows are here.
Yeah, probably. Hey, the T on the is parent, is that because you want it? Is that for true? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, T is true, false. Yes, you can put in a T, a Y, a 0. You know, it's a logical field, so it only holds one character. And any one of the 3 would have given me the same. So T, Y, or I think 0 is true in binary. I could have put any of those in and it would have brought me back the same results of all the parents that are true, or all the files that are parents of other files. So I wanted to find an assembly with some children is why I put that up there.
Mhm.
That thumbnail, as I said, is only available when you're on the search results. Any other screen, that thumbnail is not available. I'm going to remove it because I want to see more records here. Okay, if I add columns, if I right click and add a column, it will always add the column to the left of wherever I right clicked. And once I add a column, it'll remove it from this list that I can't add it a second time. So if I add this application version, it's going to add it to the left of the column that I right clicked on, which was file name. If I want to move it, I can drag and drop it and put it someplace else. If I right click and say add column again, it's going to not be on the list over here, so I can't add it a second time. Removing the column, simply right click and say remove the column. Any column that I put up here, I can sort on by left clicking on it, and it sorts it alphabetically. Click on it, left click on it again, it sorts it reverse alphabetically. And so any column I put up here, it can be sorted on. And this one's missing. This one's missing toolbox items.
Also, just so you're aware, Todd, we don't have all of our files in Adept right now. We just
Okay.
have, this is a sample set.
Okay.
It's a copy. It's a copy. So anything you do, it's not going to be permanent. You can do whatever you want and not worry about messing our stuff up.
Oh, okay. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm very careful when I'm working with customer data that I don't that I don't change anything. That I'm always working on copies, but it is good to know that I don't have to worry about it. Okay, so on the column headers, I described all the right-click functionality there already. On the actual rows, when I right-click on it, I will always get the same right-click menu here. Commands are only available one place. They're either available on the right-click menu or they're available on one of the ribbons up here. In the task pane, the commands are not available in more than one location. Like in the desktop client, there's usually like 2 or 3 ways to do anything. In the task pane, there's only one way to do it. So if I want to check out this file, I can't go up here to the ribbon to find checkout because checkout is on the right click here. If I want to copy out a file, which is the first thing I always do, I right click on it and say copy out. Right clicking and saying checkout and right clicking and saying copy out brings me up to the same exact dialog. It's just which one is checked here at the beginning. Is the copy out checked or is the checkout checked? Okay, since I'm in a copy out command, it's copy out and my copy out options here become available to me. I can click on the plus sign here and I can display all the children of that. If I right click on the column header here, I can expand all, and that'll expand all the plus signs. Whatever I have expanded, if I right click on the copy out, I can do a check all visible, and that will check everything that's visible in that command. If I go to a subassembly that has, let me go to something that has a whole bunch of subassemblies in it. If I can find something real quick here. Okay, this has some subassemblies in it. So if I was to right click on this and say copy out here, and I click on this plus sign, I'm only expanding one level. And if I right click on say
check all visible, it's going to check all of them that are visible here, but when I expand these, it's not going to have any of those children checked because they weren't visible when I right-clicked and said check all visible. Now, if I right-click up here and say check all visible, it's going to get them because they are visible there. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to take an existing assembly and make a new assembly out of it. So here's this gun case here that has a missing child. I don't want something with a missing child. Okay, this one has children with no missing ones. Yes. Okay, so I want to take this assembly and make a new assembly out of it. So I'm going to right-click on it and say copy out. And I'm going to get all of it. So I'm going to right-click up here and say expand all. And I'm going to come up here and right-click and say check all visible. If I want to reuse something as is, I simply uncheck it. And that will reuse that as is. So anything I want to make new, I want to get in here and I'm going to be copying all of it out at the same time. As long as I copy everything out at the same time, then all my renames that happen to it are automatically going to get interrelated. So anything I'm copying out at the same time is going to get interrelated to the new file names. I'm going to pick a work area to put it in, and I'm going to say OK.
Hey, Todd?
Yes.
With what you just did, I think it's just looking at assemblies and parts.
Correct.
What about the drawings?
Okay, if I want to do the same thing and get the drawings, what I do here is the same thing as I just did. I want to expand all. I want to select one, well, I don't even need to select anything yet. Down here at the bottom, drawings were parents. So down here at the bottom, I want to put in .slddrw. If I want PDFs, I can do a semicolon .pdf, etc. And hit my refresh button here, and it's going to look at all of the files up here, and it's going to go up one level and find all the drawings, because remember, drawings were parents of these files. So by putting in the extension here and hitting the refresh, it looked at every one of these files to see if there was a parent drawing for it, and if there was, it would add it to the list up here. That I could do the right click and say check all visible and get all the drawings as well.
Okay.
This filtered button. If I check this filter button here, it's going to automatically look at this list, and anything that's in a library that's marked as a filtered library is going to get removed from the list. Filtered libraries are libraries that are set up by your administrator, and they're set up to handle your common parts. So like,
Todd, can we go back for just 1 second?
Yep.
So when you put in the SLD DRW, it's looking for files with that extension with the same exact name as what's above, or is it actually looking at SolidWorks child-parent relationships?
It's looking at child-parent relationships, and it's going into the Where Used tab. Okay, so it's going to every one of these files to the Where Used tab and seeing if there's an SLD DRW on that Where Used tab.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't matter what the file name is of the drawing. This drawing could be called Part 1.
the SLD DRW for this file could be called part 1, and it will come up in the result set here, because it's not looking at the file name to determine what is a parent. It's
Right.
looking at the actual extracted relationships that Adept extracts from the files.
Okay.
And that includes manual relationships too. So even if it wouldn't have been an extracted relationship to the drawing, if you would have set a manual relationship to it, it would have found that as well.
Okay.
The filter checkbox here, when your administrator is setting up libraries, they can indicate certain libraries being filtered libraries when they're defining a library. And this is all that checkbox does when they're defining the library. If they define a library as filtered, when you check this box, anything that is defined as filtered will get removed from this list up here. And what filtered libraries are used for is it's used for your standard parts. So like all of Toolbox will be filtered libraries, because you don't take a 1/4 20 by 3 inch long bolt and check it out to make a 120 by 20 by 4 inch long bolt. You don't check it out, you make a new file. So once you create that file, it's never modified. That's used over and over and over again in multiple assemblies. So you put those bolts and nuts and all fittings and all of those things into what are called filtered libraries, because when you're making a new assembly, you don't want to copy that bolt. You want to reuse it as is, or you're going to replace it with a different size completely with a different file. You're never going to edit the 3 inch long bolt to make a 4 inch long bolt. So by quickly being able to remove all those filtered items from the list is what that's for, is what this checkbox is for. So things that are filtered libraries, Toolbox, as I said. If you have purchase parts, that would be filtered libraries. If you have decals and placards that you put on equipment, that would be a filter library. It doesn't mean you can't check them out to edit them. Like if you have a decal or a placard and it has your company logo, which next year your company logo changes, so you want to update them all, you can check them out and modify them if you want. All it's doing is saying on a regular basis, I don't normally modify these files. I use them as is, or I replace them with a different file entirely. So your administrator determines what is filtered libraries, and any library they've marked as a filtered library, when you turn this on, files coming from those libraries will get removed from the list up here at the top. That's all it's for. That's all the filtered is for quickly narrowing your list down, that you don't accidentally check out something you shouldn't, or copy out to make a new assembly something that should be used as a standard part. Okay. So that's all you set in here, and then once you select your copy out and give it the new file name, it copies the files out. If I go to my work area and look in my work area, I will see the copies of those files out here in my work area. And if I go to the assembly, you'll notice down here in the relationships, the one file that I did not copy out is still left alone and coming from the library. All the rest of them are in my work area. However, Solidworks doesn't know those new file names yet. Adept does, but Solidworks does not. Once I drag and drop this and open it, in SolidWorks, okay, so I drag and drop it, I select my action of open and say okay. As it's opening, SolidWorks is asking for the old file name, and Adept's integration is handing it the new file name. So as it's opening it, it's repathing all of those to the new file names. And when it's all done, I will have the new assembly with all the new file names in it. So there's many clients out there that really like that feature of Adept, of being able to copy out and rename all these files, and then once you open it, the integration does all that repathing for you.
Right.
Makes it really easy for making new assemblies. Now, once I hit save here, SolidWorks will know all the new file names as well. So that's what I said. If you're going to go out on the road or something, you're going to do something like that, you're going to copy it out, make the new names and everything, open it once with the integration running. save it. Once you do your file save, then if I look at my references here, you will see that SolidWorks now knows the new path and everything to that work area and what the new file names are, so that I don't have to have the Adept integration running for SolidWorks to find those files again. But you do have to have the integration running once for it to do all of that work. Now I could turn off the Adept integration. I could open and close that assembly all I want without having Adept running, because everything's either in my virtual library or in my work area. Okay, so that's the right-click, copy out and check out. You will notice that my right-click menu never ever changes. So even though I'm in my work area where I don't have check out and copy out available to me, they're still here, they're just grayed out. In my work area, I can only do a check-in of the file. If I want to view the document, I can only view documents that are in my work area. Or I can only view documents that are up in the library with the web browser. So if they're in my work area, I cannot view the documents, because the web viewer cannot get to that file on your local hard drive. It can only get to files that are up on the server. Okay, so if I come over here to my search results and right click, I do have the view file. And I click on view document, and it's going to view it using the web viewer, web Java based viewer.
Out of curiosity, why is it called web? Is it off the internet or something, or?
What's that?
No, but he's asking why is it called web? It's using an internal website.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's an internal website that you're hosting on your server there locally. It's not going out to the internet at all.
Okay.
It's called web because when you open up your Internet Explorer or whatever, you go to a web address to log into it. You don't need to load software locally in order to run the basic part of the Adept integration. We do for the SolidWorks Pane part, but it's still accessing things through the HTTP calls. That's why in the login screen here, when we went to the configuration and logged in, it had, when we configured the data source, it was actually configuring an HTTP string at the bottom of where to log into. And when you're viewing a file through this, it views it, it actually renders the file on the server and delivers it to your workstation as a Java. That's why you saw Java come up. So you're not actually launching the desktop viewer like you are with the desktop client. You're launching just a web page that's viewing it through JavaScript. Okay, the next one down here is the view data card. The data card is exactly the same as it is with your desktop client. You can switch data cards if you have multiple data cards defined. What you cannot do is you cannot do an update document. Okay, with the desktop client, there's an update document checkbox up here that you can check, and then you can fill in data and push it to the properties of the file. Here, there is no update document command. Next thing you can do, if you have rename permission in library, then you'll have the rename. Otherwise, this will be grayed out. If you have delete permission in library, then this will be available. Otherwise, this will be grayed out. When you're over in your work area, you can always rename and delete files that are at a status of new or duplicate. If they're not in a library yet. Yes, go ahead.
Going back to the data card thing.
Yep.
So if you start a new file, does that mean that you have to start a new file on your desktop so you could fill out the data card, or on the desktop?
Whenever you're starting a new file, you are starting it in your work area. So if I say file new here and I pick a new part or assembly or whatever.
But to fill in that data card, you have to get out of this plugin, or does it have to be done on the desktop?
Normally, when you do a new file, we're going to be using the templates. So you're going to click new from within the desktop client.
Okay.
That template you've been working on that has the title block.
In the desktop client, not in here.
Right. And that way, when you fill out that title block, it will also fill out the data card.
Yeah, the mapping isn't done yet for your properties to your fields in the Adept database, but you'll do a file new, you'll start a new file, put it in your work area, save it. As soon as you save it in your work area, Adept is going to extract that file and create a data card for it. Now, if you go in and you fill in the properties, if you go in and fill in all your custom properties and everything here to populate your title blocks and that stuff, Adept will extract the properties. Adept does not extract from the title block directly. It extracts from the properties here. When it's extracting, it extracts configuration properties first, then it extracts custom and summary properties. So if you happen to have like material on the custom tab and you have material on the configuration tab, Adept's going to extract it from the configuration tab and never get to the custom tab because it already got it from the configuration tab. So if you have material here, it'll extract it. If you have material in another file on here, it will extract it. As if it's on both tabs, it will only extract it from configuration. That will automatically populate the data card. But on your data card, you can have other fields as well. So if I go over here to my work area and I look at that part 1 file here, and I open its data card, I can have other fields on my data card that are not linked to properties, and yeah, I can go in here and fill them out with whatever metadata I want, as long as they're not extraction fields. And it looks like all of your data card fields are extraction fields.
Okay, so
here's one that's not. So if it's not an extraction field, I can fill it out here. If it's an extraction field, I cannot fill it out here on this data card because I can't do an update document. But anything that isn't extraction, I can fill out here.
Okay, so the data card gets filled from Solidworks, but Solidworks doesn't get inputs from the data card.
It can, but not here in the task pane. Using the desktop client, I can, because in the desktop client, if I go, let me close this and come over to the desktop client and go to my work area. So over in the desktop client, if I open up the data card, here I have this update document button. That if I have that permission, it opens up all these extraction fields that I can actually push it from the data card into the property. But from the task pane, I can't do that. I can't do that pushing in this version. So in the task pane, if I want to fill out those extraction fields, I have to open it in SolidWorks and go in and say File, Properties, fill them out here, say OK, and then Adept will extract them.
Okay. So, like I was, Pete and I were playing around with this a little bit on the templates of the drawings, for example, the custom properties don't appear unless you fill them in already.
Okay.
Well, at least we're doing them. So if they don't show up yet because they haven't filled in, can you use a desktop client to, like, assuming the mapping's already done,
Yes.
can you use the desktop client to fill in those cards?
Yes.
Okay. And then after that, then all the custom properties that were mapped will show up on the drawing.
The custom, if you have your Adept option set to create the properties on update document, then yes, and yours are set that way. So over here, when we set up your system, configure SolidWorks, we turned on this create new properties on update document, which means that if you have an old file that doesn't have the property in it yet, and you open up the Adept data card and fill in that metadata on the data card and then push it to the file, it will create that as a custom property and push it to it.
Okay.
When Adept creates a new property, it never creates a configuration property in a part or an assembly. It always creates it as a custom property.
Okay.
And in drawings that are in SolidWorks drawing files, there is no configuration properties. There is only custom properties. So yes, to answer your question, all your old files that don't have those properties built into them yet, Adept can create them by filling in the data card and pushing it to the file. Now, that will not create a title block, and it will not link, or it will not populate the title block. And even in ones where your title block is linked to those properties, Adept will only push to the property. You'll have to open it in SolidWorks for SolidWorks to read the property and populate the title block.
Right. You would have to like relink it or something.
You wouldn't have to relink it. All you would have to do is just open it. So like if you have a part number and it's called part 1, and from Adept you go in and say, oh, I don't want it to be part 1 anymore. I want it to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you fill in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the data card and push it. Well, the title block is still going to say part 1 until you open that drawing with SolidWorks, and SolidWorks sees, oh, the property's been updated. I'm going to update the title block.
Okay.
So, your thumbnail is going to still show part 1. When you view it with the viewer, it's going to still show part 1. But when you open it with SolidWorks, it's going to say, oh, it's been updated, and now the title block will say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You'll save it. Now the viewer and the thumbnail will both show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
Okay. That is something that's going to be a future enhancement, is the ability to right-click on here and do update documents, but it's not in the product at the present time. So it is coming in a future version. What else can we do on the right click? I said we can rename and delete files. You can always do that with files that are at a new or duplicate status in your work area because they aren't in a library yet. If the file is in libraries, then the rename and delete commands are dependent on your library securities. If you have a file in workflow, we actually have workflow capabilities here, approving, rejecting, assigning, unassigning files. So you have workflow capabilities to send files through the workflow with the task pane. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later on how to view workflows and that stuff. Favorites. If I want to create a favorites list, I have to create the favorites list up here first. So I have to right click up here and say create the favorites list. Once I create the favorites list, then down here on the right click is where I add files to that favorites list. Okay, so when I say add to list, I see all of my favorites lists that are already existing. I can't create a new one with this right click. I have to first create the new one and then I can start adding to it. It's parent-child relationship. So let me come back here to my results area. So these are all my parents. So if I right-click on any one of these, I can come in and say a search for children. And that will find me all the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. If I want to include my parent drawings, I would simply check this box, and then over here I would put in .sld drw. If I want to include drawings and PDFs, I would put in a semicolon .pdf. If I want to get rid of all the stuff that's coming from filtered libraries, I simply put a checkbox in there, and I say OK. And that brings me back a search result set where it's that file and all its children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, goes up one level and finds all the drawings and PDFs that are attached to these one level up. Now that I have all of that in a search results, I can do a Control-A to select everything, and I can check it all out, or I can copy it all out. When I'm in a multi-select mode like this, I can do things like rename, check out, copy out, that kind of stuff, add it to favorites list. But when I'm in a multi-record environment, I don't have the drag and drop capabilities.
So can you show the rename functionality for multiple files?
Right click. I have multiple files here. I can come in and do a right click and say rename, and it brings me up the renamer. I have to go in and hit my checkbox on any file that I want to rename.
So replace that 5-digit number, the 14985, replace that with something else.
Okay, so I will come in here and 14985. I have to check them all first. Okay, I have to put my checkbox here up here that I'm going to rename them and replace 14985 with training.
Now, Todd,
Yes.
right now, at this point, with the files that you selected, we're actually renaming the original file.
That is correct.
Right?
And not only renaming the original file, we're renaming every version of the original file.
Right, okay, so.
So if
And they're checked in.
If these were checked into Adept, because I'm in as an administrator and these are in status files, when I rename the in version of the file, I also rename all the previous versions of that file. So if it was at Adept version 15, meaning that it was checked in and checked out and checked in and checked out and checked in and 15 times, it may take a while to rename because it's not only renaming the 15th version of it, it's renaming the 14th, 13th, 12th, 11th, 12th, all the way down to 0.
You do a check all, or do you have to manually check all each one?
I had to manually check all up here at the rename.
So, and another thing is, if there's another assembly not on here that calls these,
Yes,
you're not breaking the link to them.
that is correct.
So after you do this rename, if you go open up another assembly somewhere else that happens to call one of these files, it's going to know where it is. It's not going to give you the message, hey, this file's missing, do you want to locate it? It's already going to know.
Yeah, but this isn't something that everybody has, this option.
Who's everyone?
Every one of us here has that rename.
Yeah.
So what's different from you said because you have an administrator, you can do something, right?
The renaming of files in libraries
We can talk about it.
is a library
Because there's a difference.
right here. This engineer, when I go in, anybody logged in that's logged in this group engineer, they can do this level of security. If this checkbox is checked over here, rename documents in libraries, then they can issue the rename of files in the libraries.
We didn't give you that, but
If I'm in as an engineer, I can rename files in that library. If I'm logged in as somebody in this group, I don't have that permission. So an in file I would not be able to rename. So it all depends on your securities in the library that your administrator has given you. If you have this permission, then yes, you can rename the files in the library.
And I also noticed you don't have to check something out to rename it.
If I have that permission, then that is correct. I do not have to check it out. Actually, I don't think I can rename it if it's out.
I mean, you have the same feature, the replace, rename thing in the copy command. It's there.
Right, yeah.
So you can, you know, do a copy, change the 5-digit number to a new 5-digit job number and save everything.
All right, it's like if you start this as an R&D project, this file, you just name it plate.
Yeah.
And then, oh yeah, we're gonna end up using it. Just give it a part number looking file name. You could just rename it this way and not worry about losing your links to your assembly or anything.
Right.
Okay.
You rename it this way, you move it, you'll be able to move it from the R&D library to the production library, and all these different things are not going to break the link.
Right. Right.
Correct. And I'll be showing you tomorrow how to determine if the renames and that stuff have been committed to Solidworks yet or not. Because you will not break the links and everything with Adept's integration running. But if you were to go in and tell Adept to forget what it knows about the relationships and then go in and re-extract it, if the stuff has not been committed to Solidworks, it will come up and say, I can't find the child anymore. So I'll be showing you tomorrow how to make sure that things get committed to Solidworks, that Solidworks knows the new names as well as Adept. Because, you know, at this point, if I hit the OK button here, I've renamed the files in Adept, and Adept knows that I've renamed those files, but Solidworks will not know it unless the integration is running. For Solidworks to actually know the physical information, I have to open it and save it with Solidworks while the integration is running, so that way Solidworks can ask for the old name and Adept can hand it the new name as it's opening it. Any other questions on renaming and copying out and making new files? You know, this is actually renaming the files in the library. What I did before with the copy out command and putting in the same thing with replacing with other things, that's making a new file out of an existing one, not touching the original. Okay, I did the search for children and found the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. If I right-click on this file and go to search for where used, wait a minute. Okay. I don't know why I'm not getting the search for where used button. I need to search for children. Get rid of that one. And we'll do is. And let me find a child file. And right click.
Search for where used isn't turned on here. I'm going to have to see if I can find out why search for where used isn't turned on. That should do the opposite. It should show me all the parents. Should show me all the parents one level up of where that file is used. It doesn't recourse up and up and up and up and up. So if I go to the Where Used tab down here, it would just bring me back a result set of everything that's on this Where Used tab. And what other right-click function do we have here? And we can refresh our results. It's the same as hitting F5. Be careful with if you're going to use the keyboard shortcuts like F5, because if my mouse is here in the results area and I hit F5, it's going to refresh that results. If my mouse is down here in the document dashboard and I hit F5, it's going to refresh that as results. See, we determine where your mouse is before we turn on the F5. If we're out here in SolidWorks, if my mouse is out here in SolidWorks and I hit the F5, nothing happens. So be very cautious where your mouse is when you're using keyboard shortcuts, because it is dependent on where your mouse is. We try to determine where your mouse is. Okay. Also, like here, my mouse is touched up there. You notice how this became active up here. Now if I move my mouse over here, it's still active over here. So if I move my mouse over here into SolidWorks and I do like Control O for open, my keyboard shortcuts aren't working over in SolidWorks because Pane has focus. So if I want my keyboard to work over here in SolidWorks, I have to click over in SolidWorks. Now when I do my Control O, I get my SolidWorks open command. Okay, that's a little bit different than all these other SolidWorks windows up here. In these SolidWorks windows, they behave the same thing, but you actually physically have to click. Because notice how it got focus when I'm over here, but if I move my mouse, it's lost focus because I haven't left clicked yet. If I come over here and left click, now it retains focus when I move my mouse. Okay, that's how SolidWorks windows work. The Adept window, we were asked by customers to actually sense that the mouse is there and to actually automatically set focus that we don't have to left click over there. That was a customer request that we put in. So now I've moved over, it's got focus. If I move back over here, Adept still has focus. So therefore that means my shortcut keys don't work in SolidWorks until I actually get out of the task pane and give focus back to SolidWorks. Make sense? I bring that up because it's a common thing that we get from customers all the time is my keyboard shortcut stopped working in SolidWorks with the task pane. So that's how you have to get it back is. And if you don't have anything open in SolidWorks, so unfortunately, just left clicking. If I was in this state here where I didn't have anything open and I got focus over here, then when I move over here and left click, I haven't lost focus yet. So my keyboard shortcuts still don't work. I actually have to physically come up and click on something to like start a new part or something like that. So that way it loses focus and then my keyboard shortcuts start working again. So. Okay, so we've described all these tabs up here at the top. We've described everything that's available in the middle box here as far as right-click selections and that kind of stuff. So the next thing is drag and drop. We have this type down here and file name box here. If I select something, it's going to be this is at an in status, so the type down here is going to be read only. In my drop down here, I will have the ability to check that file out or copy it out when I drag and drop it.
If I don't have security to check out, then I would not have that in the list. If I don't have security to check out or copy out, I wouldn't have that in the list. If I don't have security to do read only, then I wouldn't even see it in my search results. So this is at an in status, and I have the permission to check it out, copy it out, or open it as a read only file. So if I want to check that file out, I click on there, and file name still is not available to me. If I drag and drop it, it will check it out to my current active work area, and then it will open the file. If I haven't set a work area yet, because as I said, when I first come into the task pane, I do not have an active work area yet until I actually go to the work area tab and select a work area. Then when I drag and drop, it's going to pop up a notice saying that there is no active work area set yet, because I haven't set an active work area. Now, in this session, I have, because I've already gone to the work area tab and built it. So when I do this, it's going to actually check that file out to that work area, and then it's going to open the file. And then it's going to open the file or insert it or whatever I pick in this dialog box. So now I'm working with it as a read and write file. Okay, I'm going to close that. Don't save.
Hey, Todd?
Yes?
So you just dragged in that part as into SolidWorks, the checkout, so I can actually modify that part, correct?
That is correct. I've checked it out to my work area. The status is now out to me, and it opens as a read and write file.
Okay.
If I select this file and leave this at read only, I don't get the checkout notice. I get just this dialog, and I say okay. And when that finishes opening, up here at the top it's saying read only. Here it's popping up a thing saying that it's read only. Oh, this is saying not found. So this had missing relationship. Yeah, it had missing children. So up here it's popping up a notice saying read only. I can't do a save. If I was to try to do a save, I would get the save as dialog, and the location of where it would want to be saving. Oh, here it's letting me save. The location it's saving is in the virtual library, and therefore, as soon as I clear my virtual library, I would lose all those changes. The SolidWorks is letting me save a read-only file. If I click this box here, do not save read-only documents, then it would not let me save that file. So yeah, you have to watch here because I'm working with a read-only file in this case because I did not check it out.
All right. So Todd,
yep.
Go back to what I want to start a new assembly. Okay.
Right.
I want to bring in that right where your cursor is. There's a part.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to change that part. I want to start a new assembly using that part.
Okay. So I would come up here and I would do a file new.
Okay. So now, typically, what I would do is I would open that part as a read-only, just because it's what I'm used to doing.
Okay, so I start a new assembly. It's bringing me up to this. I just hit my cancel button here and close out of this. So I've started a new assembly. I haven't named it yet. So normally what I do is I save it right away to give it a file name, but that's up to you. You don't have to and it's going to default to my work area. So I'm going to call this training 1. And I'm going to hit save. Now I want to use that part. As you said, I want to use that part. I don't want to modify it. I just want to use it as is. I will come over here, find that part. It's at a status of in. I'm going to use it as read only. I'm not going to modify it. I'm going to use it as is. Drag and drop. I want to do an insert.
because I want to use it in this assembly. I don't want to open it new. So I'm doing an insert. I say OK. If I want to place it multiple times, I would push my push pin here. Place it. Place it. Place it. Place it.
Chris Kent, 1502. Chris, 1502.
So, all right, so now, okay, so now you installed all that.
Mm-hmm.
So does the standard insert in SolidWorks, does that like really not function anymore?
Well, it functions if the file's in your work area, but the file's not in your work area and you can't get to it through Windows Explorer. So therefore, if you say file insert with SolidWorks, you have no way of browsing out to the file because it's in Adept's vault and you have no way of browsing to it through Network Neighborhood.
Okay, so you have to go through the Adept thing to insert another part.
Or check it out to your work area.
Library. To insert a part from the library. So
From the library.
yeah, so the meaning the SolidWorks insert tool still works, but it doesn't know how to speak Adept. So if you guys were doing an R&D project and you were really just proof of concept, somebody said to draw something up really quick, obviously we don't want to put those parts into the libraries. You're just going to draw something really quick because Chuck came up with some idea.
Libraries, vaults.
Right, that you're not even going to use it. You're just going to go open up SolidWorks and do File New, start creating some parts, and you're going to save them on your desktop, just like always, right? And then yes, the insert tool will see those, but the insert tool doesn't speak Adept, right. So you cannot insert something from within a library into your drawing. What you can do is when you check out a file, if I check something out from the library, it actually puts a copy of it on my local computer, and now the insert tool can see it, right? Because it's just a normal file on your computer. But again, if you're checking, if the point of using the file is because you're going to do something at the assembly level, not the part level, you probably should not check out the part.
Correct.
Right.
And definitely do not copy them out.
Right.
The only time you should ever copy out is if you're taking an existing part in Adept and wanting to make a new part out of it. That's the only time you should ever copy out a file from Adept. Because what would happen is if you check out the assembly and copy out the part, you're telling Adept that I want this assembly related to the copied version of the part in my work area, not the library version in Adept. And then if you say, oh, okay, well, I'm done using that part now, so I'm just going to delete it because it's a duplicate in my work area. Well, when you delete it, you've broken the relationship of that assembly to that part because that assembly is related to the duplicate that's in your work area, not to the one that's in the Adept library being controlled. And when you deleted the duplicate in your work area, you've told Adept that this assembly can't find this part anymore. So never ever copy out something from Adept in order to insert it, or if you want it in your work area, check it out. You can always do an undo checkout of unchanged children if you haven't changed it, but don't ever copy it out. I have many clients that they go into this copy command and they start copying out a whole assembly of files. They right click on here and say copy out, and they say, oh, I want to make this one new, and I want to make this one, I want to make this one new, I want to copy, I want to edit this one, and I want to use this one as is. So I'm going to copy it out, and I'm going to edit this one. So I'm going to check this, and they set this. Well, guess what? You've just related this assembly to the copied version of this file, not the one that's in Adept, and to the checked out version of this. So then if you go in and delete this file from your work area because it's a duplicate, you've just broken this relationship and caused one of these things where Adept can't find it. Because you told it that you wanted it related to the copy, not to the version that's in Adept.
So don't ever do that. If you don't want to edit it and you don't want to make a new part out of it to put in a different part number, don't copy it out. If you want to check this out and copy this out because you're making a new part and you want to change this assembly to using the new part, then this is legal. And I'm going to go in here and rename that copied out part number to have a new prefix. Or change one number to another. Now I'm setting up a new relationship in the new version of this assembly.
Hey, Todd.
Did I just confuse you, or go ahead?
No, it's okay. One thing I noticed in SolidWorks, when you do this copy rename thing, it actually changes color of items that you're changing. Does that happen here at all, or?
No, it doesn't. Not that I've ever seen. That's a SolidWorks feature. You know, if you do something like that in SolidWorks, I've never seen it happen here because as you're opening it, Adept's telling it what file it's asking for instead of SolidWorks asking for that file. So as far as SolidWorks is concerned, it always asks for the new file name because that's what Adept's integration is telling it.
Okay, I just didn't know if it was like a graphical thing that lets you know.
No, it's not that I've ever seen.
So the way you did that insert part into the assembly, you first made the assembly file, and then that option of insert came up, or was that, can you just do that option and SolidWorks would automatically start a new assembly?
I did not activate the SolidWorks insert command. I did not activate any SolidWorks commands. Instead, I found Adept, found the file I wanted to work with.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm referring to. Like you dragged it in as read-only.
I dragged
it in. And then there was a checkbox.
And because I have an assembly, because I have something open in SolidWorks already, now in my action, when I click on the drop-down, not only do I have open, but I have insert as well.
Oh, okay. So you had to have the assembly or a part open in there to get.
Yeah, if I didn't have anything open in SolidWorks yet, the only option I would have in this drop-down is open.
And you would get that insert command there also if you had a part file open?
If you want to do a derived or mirrored part, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Okay. Now, if I want to replace a part, I inserted 5 of those. If I want to select one of these, I can select it over in the tree, or I can select it up here in the graphic, whichever. And now if I come over to Adept and I pick a different part, and I drag and drop it, you'll notice that in the action area here, I have replace. And that's how I do a replace.
Now was that, I didn't see that. It's only working on that one part?
A replace only works on that one part.
Was there a replace all, or?
If I select the file, if I select any file over here that's indicated multiple times, so I select something that's in there multiple times and come over and search Adept and find a different one. I'll pick this one, drag and drop it. I also have, instead of replace, I have replace all.
Okay.
And that's going to replace all of them that had that same file name. Okay. It may break assembly constraints, but that's normal when you're doing a replace. That's nothing Adept's doing, that's SolidWorks. Now, if I select one file and come over, you'll notice that if the command
that I performed last when I did a drag and drop is available, it defaults to the last command that I activated. So because I have something selected here, replace and replace all were available, so therefore it defaults it to replace all. If I didn't have anything selected over here first, okay, I don't have anything selected. Now when I come over here to the task pane and select a file and drag and drop, replace and replace all are not available because I don't have anything selected in the graphic or in the tree. So it defaults to a different action. So as long as the last action that you were able to perform is available on the dropdown, it will default to that last action. So as I said, if no files are open in SolidWorks yet, cancel, close everything. If I don't have anything open in SolidWorks, don't save. When I come over here and drag and drop, the only action I can do is open. So when I drag and drop, in my action drop down here, I only have open. Once I have something, go ahead.
On the top, you have also this configurations and extended options. Is that going to be available or?
Yes, yes, they are available. What happens is if I click on a file that has configurations and I drag and drop it, and you click on the drop down, you will see the configurations that Adept is aware of. Okay? If the file has configurations that Adept isn't aware of, if I click on extended options, watch this thumbnail, it's going to change. So the thumbnail changes because now we're reading the thumbnail directly from the SolidWorks file. And in the configurations drop down, we're reading all the configurations directly from the SolidWorks file. We're not reading them from the Adept's configuration storage. So with the extended options, when I check that checkbox, it's reading that SolidWorks file and pulling the things directly from that SolidWorks file to give me what extended options are available and what display states are available and what configurations are available.
So,
okay, the extended options part was put in there. It doesn't do any Adept commands. The extended options were put in there so that I can mimic when I come in here to the file open and I pick a file from here, it reads the file and turns on and off these options down here at the bottom. So that when I click on the extended options, I'm doing the same thing. I'm reading that file and populating all the various dialogues with whatever I see here. So like this one has 2 configurations in it and can be resolved in quick view. If I do the same thing on that train hyphen file, so I come over here to my work area and do the train hyphen file. I think it was this one. Drag and drop it. Right now, I'm reading Adept's options for configurations. Once I click on this extended, and I don't have a mode, and I don't have a display state, I don't have a load lightweight, I have a load lightweight here that I can turn on and off, but I don't have a do not load hidden components, that kind of stuff. If I click on extended options, it reads the SolidWorks file and says, oh, I can do it resolved, or I can do it quick view, or I can do display states of default, and here's the configurations that are built into SolidWorks that I can use, which happen to match Adept, because Adept extracted the configurations. And now I can say, okay, and it's like taking that file and issuing the file open command and setting these options in SolidWorks open command. That's what the extended options checkbox does. Is it switches you from Adept only mode to Adept SolidWorks combo mode.
So is there something that we have to do if we have a second configuration to make Adept aware of configuration?
No, Adept is going to be aware of configurations when it extracts the file. Because over here, the configured plugins for Solidworks, we told Adept to extract all configurations and sheets. Now, we're also telling Adept not to display the default configuration. So that means that in Adept, we're not going to necessarily see default configuration. So like if I come here and I look down here on my configurations tab, I only see this configuration. I don't see default. On this particular file, I do see default because evidently that option was turned on when this file was extracted originally. Evidently at some point of your importing of these files, configure plugins, SolidWorks. At some point of these files being imported, this checkbox was turned on. And files were extracted, and we got the default configuration at that point. It was then turned off, and other files were brought into the system. So that's why some have the default, and some do not. It could also be that this file doesn't have defaults in it. If I come up to this one, drag drop, and hit my extract it. Yeah, that one they renamed the default to be something else. But by and large, any files brought into Adept will not have that default configuration shown because we're not extracting it if it's named default. Okay. So is all of this data just for training purposes, and you're going to delete it and start over, bringing files in fresh, or?
Correct.
Okay. So that means that when you bring in the files fresh, since that option for extracting the default configuration isn't turned on, that means that when you bring it in fresh, you're not going to see default in any record in Adept.
So do we need to talk about this to make sure that I understand what the right, should that be on or off?
It's a lot of parts.
They all start
with default, right? So if you don't bring the default, then you're not going to bring.
The only thing it affects is configuration metadata. Okay. If you have properties that are configuration properties, if on a file, because every SolidWorks part and assembly has one built-in configuration called default, and and normally if that's the only configuration, then most customers only ever fill out custom properties, and that's it. They don't ever configure put in configuration properties. If they're going to put in configuration properties, then they don't use the default configuration. They rename it to something else because it's actually a configuration they want to use. So they rename the default configuration to something else, and then Adept will extract it. The only time we need to turn on that option of extracting the default is we do have a couple of clients out there that put in configuration properties on the default configuration. In other words, they put in configurations and they leave the default configuration, and they use the default configuration as one of their configurations. So they put in metadata on the configuration properties for default, and they need to be extracted. If that's your case, if you do that, then we need to turn that option on.
Yeah, but we got so many parts.
So it can always, that default configuration can still remain in the part file. It's just not going to get recognized.
Yeah, the metadata, the properties will get extracted to the Adept data card as long as they're custom properties only. The only thing that would be is if you fill in configuration properties on a default configuration, Adept will not extract the configuration properties. It will only extract the custom properties.
It will extract the configuration properties of all the other named configurations other than default, but not any configuration properties on the default configuration. As I said, most clients don't use configuration properties on the default configuration, so we put in that option of don't extract default configuration, so that way we actually get, by having that off, what it means is over here in the desktop client, see these three little blue lines over here? Those three little blue lines indicate that configuration exists. That on the configurations tab, there is information. If you're extracting the default configuration, that means that even on this part that only has the default configuration, it'll show one configuration here called default. So that would have the three little blue lines. So that's the only thing that one extra thing does, is if you turn it on, it means that every SolidWorks part and SolidWorks assembly is going to have the three little blue lines, because every one of them is going to have one configuration in it called default. By having it turned off and not using configuration metadata on default, it allows you to say, oh, this one doesn't have anything other than the default configuration. But these down here do have a named configuration.
Right. Yeah, right. When you talk about extract, you're not talking about when all the files get extracted from the server to the vault with
the metadata inside the file.
So worst case scenario, if there is something that you had in a default under configurations, then you could just like rename that from or copy that from default or something else and name it something else.
That is correct.
So what I typically do is I'll use like on something that's going to have multiple configurations. The default is like, this is how I started this whole thing. Right. This is what it looks like. And then all the configurations after that are,
okay,
they're all specific lengths or whatever. So it's never going to look at the default. It'll only look at the other items.
Okay.
Yeah. So if there's a the other thing is that default configuration, for some reason, if you rename it and then rename it back to default, as far as SolidWorks is concerned, that's a named configuration now. It's no longer the built-in default configuration. So once you rename default to something else, it even if you rename it back, it never actually becomes the default configuration again, ever again.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because I've had that happen too, where customers have renamed it back to default because they weren't using it, and Adept still kept extracting it and that stuff, because as far as SolidWorks is concerned, you changed the name, even though you typed in the exact same name as what SolidWorks named it. So that's all that does. So most clients set up their options the way yours are set up. And when I had the console, that's what we decided on. Basically, it was if you were gonna use that default configuration to put configuration metadata on it, you were gonna rename it as well, so that Adept would extract it and there would actually be no default left in the file. And whichever configuration has this green dot in front of it, the last time the file was saved, that's the configuration it was on when it was saved. Like this one had the default configuration in it, and the last time the file was saved, it was saved on the default configuration, not on the 10-32 configuration.
Right now, we're looking at the desktop client, right? Not at the.
Right, I'm looking at you. I can see it here in this one too.
That's what that is.
I can't see the glyphs. I can't see all the glyphs in this one over here, because that's one of the differences that I'm. When I start showing you the differences between this desktop and this desktop, one of the big differences is over here you have all these glyphs that tell you a lot of information about the file that you don't have over here yet. They are being put over here in the task pane. They're just not there yet in this version.
Okay.
Eventually, a lot of this information in the desktop will get over here in the task pane. It's just not all there yet.
And when you open the, what do you call it, the card, the data card,
Mm-hmm.
the file, do you get to select what configuration you want to look at, or?
Now, when you open up the data card, you are seeing the information from the default configuration only. Or not from the default config, but the current active configuration. I'm sorry.
Okay, so whatever was saved at last.
Yes, whatever is saved at last, you are seeing here. If you want to see the other information from the other configurations, you can see it down here on the configurations tab in the document dashboard. And I'll be talking about all of that when I get to explaining all the tabs and that down here in the document dashboard.
Okay.
When I'm doing a search, I am searching only the current active configuration. Okay, so when I'm doing a search over here in the task pane, I am doing a search of only the current active configuration. If I want to search across all configurations, I have to do that with the desktop client right now. Because over here, when I do a search, I have the ability to check this box that says search extended. And when I check that, I'm searching across all configurations. Okay. Hopefully, eventually, that'll be put over in the task pane as well. The ability to do the search extended. It's not there yet, though. Search extended only affects SolidWorks and AutoCAD users. Inventor, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, none of that search extended works for. There is no extended data for those types of documents. So there are still some advantages to the desktop client that aren't in the task pane, but more and more features are being put over in the task pane with every version we release. So it is a lot. Is this one added? This release of the task pane added a lot of desktop functionality, like the whole document dashboard area down here was added in this release. Okay, so that's this type drop down here. You have to activate the type drop down before you do the drag and drop. And so if the file is out of status of in, you can do a read only, a checkout, or a copy out. If you activate copy out, then the file name field becomes active here. Then I can click in the file name here. I can click on the file name drop down here, and I can go in and I can change the file name. That will only change the file name of this one file. It's not the same as right-clicking and copying where you can get all the children. So this copy only gets that one record, and that's it.
Can you do that right now? Copy that?
Sure. I can take that file, I can copy it, give it a new file name. I'll just add a prefix of Todd. And now I come up here, and now that I set that, I drag and drop it. It takes that file and copies it to my work area as the new file name, and then opens the new file name. Or opens or inserts or whatever you pick here in this drop down. And as you can see, when it's finished, I have the Todd -1.
Okay, now.
Todd -1 open.
You have which one open?
Todd -. I have the,
Oh, yeah, okay, right, yep, right. Now this is gonna get saved as a new file.
correct. It's already saved as a new file. It's over here in my work area.
Right, but it hasn't been put anyplace yet.
Correct. It's just in my work area.
Now that flange, which is probably the first item in the tree,
Okay. Yeah.
I want to change that.
Okay. Select it.
So I do.
Come over here. I want to change it to this part in my work area, or do I want to change it?
No. I want to modify that part.
Oh, I want to modify that part? Well, that file isn't checked out yet.
Okay, so I want to modify that to be a new part in this assembly.
Are you keeping the original part in the library?
Yes.
Okay. So you want to do a copy out?
When? Now?
Yeah. So Todd, you could get that. So he's going to create a new part. So the original part can stay, but he's got to do a copy out of that part so he can modify it and then check it back in as a different part number.
Okay. A couple ways you could do that. You could find that part. Okay, so I could come in here and I could do a search and find that part. And this was this assembly here, so the quickest way to do a search of that, since I already have that highlighted, is a search for children.
I can't just open the thing on the right, on the left.
If I do, well, let me show this would be the proper approach here, would be this file I want to replace with something else that I'm going to make new based on that. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to find that part, which is the air. Evidently that's not in here. HDBI. Oh, I picked.
That may be an unresolved child.
Okay, so I would do a search and try. Yeah, that's the one that's unresolved. This air inlet.
And pick
that. Okay, so here's the fan housing, and here's my fan housing. So I could right-click on this and I can copy it out, give it the new name. Put it in my same work area that the other file is at. Go to my work area, and I can take that fan housing now, drag and drop it in, and tell it that I want to replace it. And then it would be a read and write file in my work area that I'd be able to edit. Okay, so that would be what I would say is the correct approach to do it. That's a
lot. So if you hit cancel here,
that's a lot of steps. The other thing you can do is you can right click on this file and you can do a SolidWorks open part. And it's going to tell me that I'm going to work with a read-only file.
Okay.
So I'm opening this file as a read-only file. I do my modifications to it. And when I hit my save button, it's going to bring up the save as dialog here. Do a save as. I'm over in my virtual library. I want to switch from my virtual library to my work area. So I have to browse out to my work area, wherever that's at, and give it a new name. Since I want to give it a new name, I don't want to actually modify that existing part. So I want to give it my new name here. And put it in my work area. So I've just given that a new name, but my assembly is still related to the old name. Or no, my assembly updated now too. So
right. Okay. No, that's
so
good.
now that's perfectly legal too, to do it that way. But now you're relying on the save as feature and picking your work. You have to browse to wherever your work area is and put it in there and that kind of stuff. Now, if I accidentally start modifying something that I don't want to give a new name, if I was to right click on this and go into the SolidWorks open part command here,
shoot.
Oh, that's all right.
That one's didn't open as read-only, so evidently that one is checked out already. And that one's unresolved. With this one.
They know.
Oh, say no? I said yes, sorry.
It's just gonna take longer.
Yeah,
Right?
that's all.
Quite a bit longer.
That one didn't open as read-only either. Okay. Close, don't save.
Well, okay, so now, there was one part that I think was checked out for somebody to review. Right, that first one,
Yeah.
the one that's in red, right?
Yeah, the top one is checked out.
All right, so now I should still be able to open the one that was in that assembly, modify it for something new, correct? Even though it's out to be, you know, some changes are being made to it, I can still take this, modify it, and save it as a new file.
Correct.
Yeah. If Gustavo has a file checked out, when you go to log in, if you search for that file, you can still copy it out. You just can't check it out.
Right.
Correct.
Right, copy it out, modify it, give it a new name.
Give it a new name, stick it back in.
Stick it back in.
Yeah, you can open it read-only. You can copy it out and then open the copied out version of the file. You just can't check it out. And if you open it, even if you open it read-only, when you do your save, it's going to bring up the Save As dialog. The only thing you have to make sure you do is switch over to your work area, because the place where it's open read-only from is the virtual library. And if you hit File Save and just give it a new file name and save it there, the next time you log into Adept, if that clear virtual library is turned on, it's going to delete what you put there. So I've had plenty of clients that have done that. They've opened things as read-only, and when they hit their save button, they got the Save As dialog, and they just changed the file name and hit save. Then they called up help desk the next day when they logged in and said, Adept lost my file. No, Adept didn't lose it. You saved it in the virtual library, and virtual library is cleared every time you log in. And so therefore it got deleted on purpose because you put it in the wrong location. So just be careful that you're not in the virtual library when you're saving files, because once you clear your virtual library, it's going to get deleted. It doesn't matter who puts the file there. Everything from the VL folder down gets deleted, regardless of who put it there and what subfolder it's in or anything like that. It's just it does a delete star.star when it clears the virtual library.
That folder is on our machine?
Yes.
Right?
Yes, that folder is, and as I said, it's in your My Documents. So it's over here, and if you go to, by default, the place where Adept puts it is under My Documents, Adept VL. And under that Adept VL, it starts creating subfolders and putting files into subfolders.
On my machine desktop, I'd be okay.
You'd be okay.
And all of these are read-only files. And right here, here's my Adept VL root folder. As I said, it doesn't matter who puts it there. I can say File New and put a text document in there or a Word document. Doesn't matter who puts it there. When I come over here to Adept and hit my Tools, Clear Virtual Library. When I come over here to my virtual library, it doesn't matter who put it there, it's going to clear it if it's not in use by Solidworks. So like my Word document got deleted because it wasn't in use by Solidworks. but this was left open because evidently Solidworks still has this one file locked for some reason.
And so when it does that, Todd, when it clears that, does it put it in the recycle bin or does it just get rid of it?
It just gets rid of it. It does not put it in the recycle bin over here. So the only thing over here in the recycle bin is stuff I've deleted or has been deleted by somebody. If you go to your work area and delete a file, that goes to the recycle bin. But the virtual library, it doesn't. That doesn't go to the recycle bin. That just goes away.
Okay.
But where did it go?
Okay, so that's what this clear virtual library button does. Okay, so if I'm in my work area, if the status is not in, then in this type down here, it has work area. And then it can't be changed to anything else. So everything from your work area is being a type of work area. If the files are out, this one's out to me, of course, so it's in my work area. But if the file is out to somebody else, then this type is only going to be read only or copy out. You're not going to have checkout permission. So the type will change based on the status of the file and your permissions to the file at that status. File name only becomes available if you're in the copy, if you're in a copy command. If I'm not in a copy command, then this file name dropdown I can't do anything with. I can't delete it. I can't rename it. It can just show me what the file name is, and that's it. Skip virtualization is not used very often. What skip virtualization will do is, right now my virtual library is fairly empty. If I come in and I find an assembly, well, let me clear this. I'm going to do a search for an assembly. If I have an assembly that has a whole bunch of children here, when I open that assembly, if I drag and drop that to open it, it's going to have to put this stuff into the virtual library in order to open that assembly properly. And that's called virtualization. We're virtualizing the files into the virtual library. If I do the same thing with take this file and dragging and dropping, but I have this checkbox checked, what's going to end up happening is we're not going to virtualize anything because it's going to skip virtualization. So anything that's already in my virtual library that it needs, it will find because it's already there. But anything that isn't in my virtual library, it's going to skip and not. So when I drag and drop this to open it, since it's going to skip virtualization, it's not going to put anything into the virtual library other than that file I dragged and dropped. So if I look at my virtual library, my virtual library will not have anything in it other than that file I dropped, and that's it. It's not going to have any of these children in the virtual library. So that's what skip virtualization does. Most of the time they'll open up a suppressed parts then because it can't find them and that kind of stuff. So it's not used very often, but it is there because it's used on occasion by a couple of clients. Not very many that I know of, though. But that's what the skip virtualization does. Again, we have the page count. I already explained that when I was doing searches. Whatever I have my page count set to, it's how many records are going to be displayed at a given time in the search results here. So right now I'm displaying 1 to 100 of 221 records. If I set this to 250, then it's going to be 1 to 221 records, and it's only going to be one page here. The higher your number, the longer it takes searches to come back because it has to put more records on a given page. If you're using a low page count, it'll bring back the searches faster. And then as you page through the records, it'll build the next set of searches. So it'll give you 25 records at a time on each page. So that's up to you where you want to set this page count to. Typically, what I do, I set it to 1,000 and wait for it. But again, it's a speed thing, and it depends how good your network is as to how high you want to set that. The lower, the faster your results are going to come back. I said these windows are resizable. You just move your arrow in here and drag and drop it to wherever you want it. The top two boxes are kind of tied together, and the bottom box is a standalone. And the reason for that is because if you switch to desktop mode, it moves the middle box over beside it. So these top two are, now I have a vertical divider instead of a horizontal one between the two. But when I control this, it's still controlling the top two boxes and giving me more room for my document dashboard. When you're toggling between the two windows, it does its best to try to remember where you were at when you were in there, but it's not 100%. So when you switch between the two, you're going to have to drag and drop windows to get it back to where you want it to be in that particular window. So now I have it set for CAD mode. I switch back to the desktop mode, and now I'm not in the right mode. Now this is too narrow over here. I have to start repositioning things to get it for desktop mode. Since it is part of the Solidworks task pane, it's dependent on where you put the Solidworks task pane as far as where this is. Most of the time, Solidworks task pane is inside of Solidworks, and it's set that when you click on here, it collapses to just the ribbon over here. But you can undock it and move it over to another monitor if you want. That does move all of these other tools as well. You can push the push pin up here and leave it visible all the time. And that means that when I click over here, it's not going to disappear on me. So all that's controlled by the Solidworks. Okay. Let me look at my handout here and let's see where we're at. So we've covered page 19 in my handout 20. We've covered the results area, which is page 21. We've covered the right-click, check out, copy out. Okay. Cover drag and drop features. One thing I didn't cover was the undo checkout. If I check out a file, and here's an out file. If I don't want to have that file checked out, when I right click on this and say check in, if the file has not been changed, if the file changed is no, then when I'm checking that file in, that wasn't enabled. Okay, let me enable it. In my notes when I had the consult, this was supposed to be enabled. Did something change after my consult?
I don't particularly remember, but with, you know, going back and forth in and out with Eric, maybe we changed it.
Okay. What this does is if I check out a file, if this is enabled, then when I go to check that file back in, if the file has not changed, I have a checkbox here that I can check that will undo the checkout. That rather, I'll still issue the check-in command, but if I do an undo checkout, when I say OK, rather than checking it in, it will actually delete the file from my work area and will not check a new file in because the file has not changed. If the file has changed, then the undo checkout would not be available. So it's undo checkout's only available if the file has not changed. File or data card has not changed. If either of these say yes, then the undo checkout wouldn't be available. But if it's not enabled in the global options, it's not available to the users. So should I check it, turn it on, or leave it off, or?
On.
On, okay. Let me hit my cancel button here. I think I'll probably have to log out and log in for that to take effect. So enable undo checkout, okay. And let's see if I have to log out and log back in for it to be effective. Right click, check in. Nope. Okay, so it's no, no. I can put a checkbox in here and I can say okay. And even though I'm doing a check-in process, because I have enable undo checkout turned on here, what it's going to do is it's actually going to just release ownership, delete the file from my work area. So that's possible to do on a check-in. The other thing that's possible to do is if I do a search and I find an assembly, I have some children. Okay. If I check this out and I check out all of its children at the same time. Come on. So if I check this all out, I'm not going to open it and do anything because I'm sure this is an older version of SolidWorks, so it's going to actually migrate everything, which means it will change everything. But if I check that file out and I work on certain files in there, so I'm not going to work on the assembly, but I am going to open this cover here. So I'm going to open that cover and save it, which will migrate it up to SolidWorks 2018. Okay, and close. So now the only file that I've actually changed is that cover. If I go to this assembly and I say, okay, I'm done making changes to this assembly. I've done all the changes I'm going to make to it. I want to check in, but I only want to check in the stuff that I've physically changed. I don't want to check in anything that I haven't physically changed. So I checked it all out because I didn't know what I was going to modify. And now I'm ready to check it in, but I don't want to check in anything that I haven't modified. I can right click on this and I can do a check in and I can see all of that here. And notice that the one file that I've changed, the undo checkout isn't available to me. So I could do it here if I want to, or I can right click on it and I can say, nope, can't do a right click. Commands are only one place. So I can click on that file here, and then I can come up here to the document ribbon, and I can do an undo checkout of unchanged children. What that's going to do is it's going to read all the files that are children of that one and show me the ones where the date and timestamp matches the date and timestamp in Adept. And I can do a bulk release ownership and delete of these if I want to. If you ever decide to turn off that undo checkout or undo check-in command in Adept, this one is still available to engineers. So even if the undo isn't on in the options, this one is available. You can select a parent and look at all of the children out there and release ownership of them without checking in, and then you can issue your check-in command to check in that file and what has changed. So 2 undo checkouts. There's the one here which has to be enabled by your administrator right on the check-in dialog, and the other one is available even if the administrator hasn't enabled undo checkout. You can do it from your work area by selecting the parent and then up here using this one. And what that does is it looks at the date and time stamp of the children and compares it to the date and time stamp of the files that are in the Adept library. If they match, then it says, okay, this one hasn't changed. This one doesn't look at library card changes. The right-click check-in one, that one looks at library card changes as well, data card changes, as well as file changes.
So say you have a file and you saved it a couple times, and then you decide, you know what, I actually don't want to apply these changes. I want to just put it back into Adept or check it in.
Okay.
You can't undo that checkout.
That is this. You cannot undo that checkout. No. Like this file has changed. If I check in, I cannot undo checkout here. And I can't use the undo checkout of unchanged children there. But I can do a release checkout, which will turn it into a duplicate. And then I can delete the duplicate. However, if you do that, okay, if you do that, when I come to the assembly, you'll notice the assembly is going to get an access denied here. And that is because the one that it was related to was the one in my work area and not the one in the Adept vault. Now, all Adept needs to resolve that is it needs the file name. It doesn't need the whole entire path. It just needs the file name. So what I can do is I can select that file here. It's access denied right now. So I go to my tools ribbon and I do a refresh extracted information. When I do a refresh extracted information, it looks for what is SolidWorks looking for there, and does that file name exist in the Adept database somewhere? If it does, it'll link it up to the first one it finds. So all it's looking for is this file name, and it's going to link it up to a record in Adept. If you have 5 records in Adept, it's going to link it up to the first one it finds. So it could link it up to the wrong one if you have duplicate file names. But that's what I was explaining would happen if you check out and copy out and then delete the duplicates. That same thing would happen, because when you checked it out with copying at the same time and then you deleted the duplicate, you created that broken link, and then you have to go in and do this refresh extracted information to link it back up to the one in Adept. I said this is always safe to use, but you do have to be careful if you have duplicate file names, because it's going to link it up to the first one it finds, not the actual one that it might require.
All right. So basically, when you release that checkout, you create that duplicate, and automatically, whether you have your assembly open or not, it just links that duplicate to the assembly.
Correct, because that's the one Adept is telling it to use. It's telling it to use the one in the work area.
Okay. All right.
And again, that's a little easier to see over here in the desktop client, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. In that, if I select a file and I come in here and I select this, over here you can see this little piece of paper here. The piece of paper with an N on it means that it's linked to the file in my work area. Piece of paper that's blank means it's linked to a record in the Adept database. And we'll talk about all these symbols and what glyphs and that all mean tomorrow. Can't see those glyphs down here in the document dashboard yet. hopefully in future release we will be able to. Okay, so all the other ribbons, all the other files on this ribbon here. On the file ribbon, we have our login, log out, and you can enable auto login if you want to, if your passwords don't change and that kind of stuff. On the document ribbon, here's where we can create a new record. This would be creating a new record from Adept. So we can use file new. We can put it in a library and check it out right away. We can create a document. We can create an unlinked record. If we're creating a document, we'll have our various templates over here that we'll be able to pick our templates. So it doesn't look like you have your Solidworks templates in Adept yet. And you pick a work area and give it a file name. You cannot use the auto name plugin. This is not linked to the auto number. If you want the auto number, you have to use the desktop client. Any file that's a duplicate, when you select the duplicate, the acquire checkout will become available. If you do an acquire checkout, it's going to look in Adept to find any file with that file name. In the acquire library, it's going to show you a listing of all the libraries that file exists in. So you can pick which library is the one you want to acquire and check the checkbox and then say OK, and it's going to make this an out document instead. Acquire checkout is the reverse of release checkout. Acquire checkout takes your file and says, I have a newer version than you do, Adept, so make mine the out version of that file. Release says, I don't want to change this anymore. I'm going to set it to be a duplicate. So that's what acquire checkout is only available if the status is duplicate. Release checkout is only available if the status is out. Okay, and when you use that, it creates a duplicate. Okay, so that just created a duplicate. Undo checkout of unchanged children, I already described. Tools ribbon. It is always safe to do a refresh extracted information. So whenever you see a missing child in the tree down here, the very first thing you should always do is refresh extracted information to see if somebody has already put a child in with that file name. And it can link it up to something in Adept. So that's always the first thing you should do. It's always safe to do that. You need to be careful with the clear extracted info, because if you have not committed the changes to Solidworks yet, if you do a clear, you're telling Adept to forget what it knows about it. So if you've issued any renames or copied out with new names and that stuff, and you clear extracted information, when you clear, it says, what do you want to clear? If you clear your relationships, then you're telling Adept to forget what it knows about parent-child relationships. And then when you re-extract it from the file, it has to read the Solidworks file to build them. If you've renamed the files, it'll create broken relationships. So be cautious using clear. It's always safe to use refresh, and something you should do if you ever see a missing child in the tree. Clear virtual library, I already told you what that button does, is everything from this VL folder down, from wherever your virtual library is set. In my case, it's the default location, so it's everything from this folder down gets deleted when I click on this clear, as long as Solidworks does not have the file locked. Okay, go ahead.
Question. So going back to that refresh extracted information, that looks at your workspace or at the like that server?
It reads the refresh extracted information, reads the Solidworks file, and anything that has already been resolved stays resolved. It just skips it. But anything that has not been resolved, it will try to find those files in Adept. And there's
so if there are two files named the same way,
which we're not allowing.
okay.
If there were
But
if there were two files,
just for some reason we copy from our server two files that are named the same.
It won't let you check the second one in.
Okay.
It's not like we're saying it. No, we turned on a flag that says
Some
the
filter.
system is monitoring it and will not allow two files with the same name.
So, but if there was that situation,
It's
there's
gotta
a
be made.
there's a whole logic built into how Adept tries to resolve.
Hold on, Todd. Hold on, Todd.
Okay.
So when you guys migrating all this over, you're renaming all those, or how works
Yes.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing is going to have to be done. Where things get so the migrate, and that's why, you know, it's very easy. I could see at other companies the ability to say, oh yeah, we'll just migrate everything over on Friday night, and on Monday morning everyone will just start using the system. Here at Preferred, there's just no way that would fly. There's a lot of duplicate file names. The folder structures in which place where things are stored is erratic from one job to the next job. The file names, it's just, so we are going to have to take a slow approach to it, and that's also why, you know, we're doing all this training with them. Next week we'll start doing lunch and learns, and we're going to start off with new data only, and then we're going to work on migrating old data. Okay.
Okay. So, if there would happen to be, granted your system is set up that it's not going to allow it, but just so you know, if it would, it's looking at just the file name. But when it finds the records in Adept, there's a whole search logic built into Adept to try to parse out the folders to link it up to the correct one. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But as a very last resort, all Adept is looking for is what is the file name .extension. And if all else fails, it will link it up to the first one that it finds in the Adept database. If that happens to be the wrong one, when you open up the assembly, you would have to do a replace to replace it with the other one. As was explained, your system is being set up to not allow duplicates in it to begin with, so that should never, ever occur. It's going to link it up to the only one that's ever in Adept, regardless of what library it's in, as long as you have access to the libraries. If there's a particular library that the file you're looking for is in that you don't have access to, when you do the refresh, you don't have access to it, so it's going to come back and say, I can't refresh it, I can't update it. So it's always safe to do that because it never affects anything that's already linked. It only looks at things that aren't linked yet. The other thing that the refresh extract does is, say your admin, you found that you needed additional properties mapped to your title blocks. Well, when the files were brought into the system, that wasn't mapped yet. Or you had part number accidentally mapped to a description field. So when that file was brought in, part number got extracted to the description field, or part number wasn't mapped and therefore didn't come over to the data card at all. Refresh extract will also re-update any of the metadata coming from properties that are going to the data cards. So it'll update that as well. It'll re-extract that and repopulate your data card. If you've added any additional configurations to the file, somebody opened the file and added configurations and saved it directly in the library, which is what happens with Toolbox with configurations. Adept doesn't know about all those configurations yet. So you've inserted a Toolbox file and you created a new configuration. Well, Adept doesn't know about that new configuration. Refresh extract will get that new configuration information. So those are things that refresh extract does. It rereads the file and re-extracts what it can do, but anything Adept already knows about the file, it's not going to mess up. So it's not going to relink relationships or any of that kind of stuff. Clear, on the other hand, as I said, Clear, you need to be careful with because you're telling Adept to forget what you know about this file. And it doesn't care if it needs that information or not. It's going to forget about it. So you need to be careful with clear extraction. That should only be used like as a last resort if you can't fix the file up in any other way. Okay, clear virtual library is going to delete everything from that VL file down. And then once you clear your virtual library, if you want, you can either open the stuff and the integration will populate the VL, or you can refresh. Go ahead.
No comment here.
Oh, okay. Or you can refresh a selected document. So you can go to a work area and pick a document and say refresh just this document or this SolidWorks file or whatever. Okay. You can refresh a whole work area, which means it's going to refresh everything in this work area. Or you can refresh all work areas, which means it's going to refresh everything in both of these work areas. The refresh commands are only available if you're on the work area tab. If you're on like a search area tab, search results tab, they are not available to you. If the files are in the library, the extractive buttons are not available to you. They're only available if it's in your work area. Okay, this button here, I'm going to expand this. Get path. If I select a record and say get path, it's going to copy it to the clipboard. I can then, I think it's a URL. Since you're in the web-based, I think I can open up and paste it. Nope, sorry. It's not a URL. Okay, the get path will actually get me the path of where that file is going to be accessed from. And I'll be able to like open a Word document or something like that and paste it in there if I want to create like a hyperlink to that file, to the virtual library file and that stuff. Not used by many clients. And then of course the options, we already talked about all of the options in here. The next tab is our collaborate, and that's a send to command. I can pick files in my results area. And I can hit my send to button, and I can send links to those files. I can send the actual files themselves. I can exclude any files coming from filtered libraries. I can send it to a ALS file, where if I want to pick documents here, then I can include the children or not include the children, and I can zip them up into a zip and exclude files in filtered libraries, and send it to an email recipient. Or I can send that file to a zip file. If I'm going to send it to a zip file, it lets me pick a folder to save that file to, file name and folder. So that's to collaborate. You can use the send to command from in here. And then tomorrow we'll talk about the workflow tab.
Is that sent to just for people within our people here, or is it send it to whoever you want outside of?
Well, if you're going to send it to internal people, then there's no need to send the documents. If you're sending to internal, you send a link, and that'll create an ALS file. They'll double click on that ALS file, and that'll launch Adept and bring back a search result showing that, and therefore the security of the files is based on what they have permission to in the libraries.
So can you copy some link into an email in there?
So
this will send an email.
Oh, this is an email. All right.
So it'll send a link to, but the links won't work to external people.
Right. Yeah.
Correct, because they don't have an Adept system and an Adept login. So when you're sending to external people, that's when you're going to have to do the send documents, and you might want to zip them up into a zip file then.
Now those documents are copies, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Nothing tells Adept that those things were just sent out, lock it or something?
Whatever version you have selected here, whatever version of these files that you have selected here, that's what will get put into the zip file. It'll copy them out, not renaming them. It'll just copy them out as they are and put them into a zip file, or not put them into a zip file, whichever you want to do.
What's your question, Sal?
When you do send them out as a zip file, are they sent out as read only?
No.
No.
So you're allowing somebody else to change your files actually.
Yeah.
Well, even if you were set to read only, they could just turn that read only flag off and change them. So
There's no way, if you send somebody a copy of a file, there's no way to stop them from being able to change it.
It's just like emailing somebody a file now. They can take that file and then do whatever they want with it.
correct.
No, not send it up through the link, through a Dropbox, through a link. You can tell, you can set flags in there that they just can't touch it. You're not allowed to change that file.
I can still change it.
You can still download it and then change it. You might say you're not allowed to log on and
They can't change
What's in the
your Dropbox,
Mm-hmm.
but they can still change the file for themselves.
Right, and same thing here is you're copying the file and sending it. They can change it. They can change their copy of the file all they want. They can't put it back into your Adept vault.
Same with Dropbox.
And if you go to Dropbox, the same thing would happen there. You'd send the zip file to your Dropbox. They can download that zip file and open it and that stuff, but they can't put it back up in your Dropbox. No, it's just that once they get their hands on the physical file on their system, they can do whatever they want to it.
Right, and I'm assuming there's like a size, like a maximum amount of, I don't know, megabytes that you could put into one of these things.
No, not in Adept. You can put whatever. If it's attaching it to an email, I'm certain your email server has a size limitation.
Right.
But if it ends up creating a 20 megabyte zip file, and it'll put 20 megabyte zip file into your email, and then when you hit send in your email client to send it, your email server is going to come back and say, I can't include the attachment, and it's going to just strip the attachment off.
Oh,
But Adept will put it in there and compose the email just like as if you were opening Outlook and composing it and attaching a 20 megabyte zip. It doesn't actually delete the zip attachment until you actually send the email, and your email server strips it off automatically.
okay. Right, so this wouldn't work on a bigger assemblies for us because
Well, it will work. It will work this way.
internally, but not externally.
To send it to a zip file, just don't include the email. Don't include any recipients or anything like that.
All right. So why? What are you saying? What's the scenario where?
So say we're working, yeah, say you're working with, like I'm working with, I don't know, National Grid per se, right? And we're sharing solid models. I update this. I would have to save this to my computer.
Right.
And then upload it to whatever, OneDrive or
whatever, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I agree.
This is basically just making an email for you. And if you can't send the email for whatever reason, then just like now, you have to figure out another way to get them the files.
Right now, most companies, when they're doing something like that, they don't want to use this feature to send that out to the external vendor to work on. Instead, they use the transmittal part of Adept to send it as a transmittal. That way, you actually have a record of what version of the file you sent out to them.
Right, so that also goes through the mail server.
Other companies will create a work area, like a work area called the vendor's name, and they'll actually check out the files that they're going to send out to the vendor. So if you're sending out files to a vendor for them to actually modify, you'll create a work area and check the files out to that work area and send them the files from the work area. and you'll keep them in that work area until they modify them and send them back to you. Then you'll replace them in that work area and check them back into Adept as a new version.
Idea.
So that way the files are in an out status so that nobody in-house is actually modifying the file while it's at the outside vendor modifying the file.
When he's talking about a work area, he's talking about some other
Just like, so just like on here, you saw the work area, there was one called Grant Admin, and there was another one called Work. You could have another one called, you know, Customer Submittal for Job, whatever.
And then, but how do you get another, like one of your customers access to that?
No, they don't get access to
They
it.
don't, okay.
You just check it out to that work area, and then you go in that work area and send the file to the customer.
Oh, okay.
He's getting a
Just like
copy.
you would any file now, you just.
You send them a copy of the files and just leave them out in that work area. When they modify them and send them back to you, then you take what they sent back to you and overfile what's in that work area. And then check that stuff back into Adept. And that's, you know, that's how you get their version of the file back into your Adept system. You have the permission to check out and check in the files. Your vendor doesn't, but they have to get their hands on your file somehow. So, and there is always the possibility. I mean, Adept is a network license, so if your company decides to, they can actually open Adept through your firewall, that your vendor could load the Adept client on their machine, and they could use all the Adept features logging into your machine through your firewall. And if you give them permission to check out the files and check in the files, they could actually check out and check in the files. And then whoever did that, their name would be logged in the audit trail as far as who did the check out and check ins and that stuff. Some companies open up their firewalls and that set, you know, even though they don't own Adept, you can give them the Adept client to load and access your database, because they'll be using one of your Adept licenses to do that. Again, that's all up to your company to decide how they want to set up your system.
Okay, when you send that link internally, you get whoever sent it to you, like you received a link, you get it on your email, or do you get it on the Adept inbox thing?
If it's the email, the send to command, then Adept doesn't know anything about it once you send it. Then it's up to you to track it in Outlook or whatever your email client is. You know, you'll send it out to them, they'll reply back to that email, and you'll be back and forth through email, totally out of the Adept system at that point.
But once that link, like I receive a link from someone that works here too. I just click on the link on my email and it just opens Adept or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay.
If they send you an ALS file, you'll double click on that ALS file. What it does is when you double click on that, it will launch the Adept client. You'll log in. Once you're finished logging in, it'll return that search results, and you'll be able to do whatever you want with those files. If you want to assign them to somebody, then you can, and that'll show up in their Adept inbox. If you want to, if somebody assigns files to you in Adept, you'll see that in your inbox. And that could be set up that when you assign something, it sends emails automatically. So there's the Adept inbox, which is when files are physically assigned to you through Adept. And then there's the send to command, which it uses email that you have to manually manage type of thing. The ALS file is a list file that's simply a saved search. When they export an ALS file, it's like performing a search. And so therefore it has to log you into Adept to perform that search and bring you back the results of that search.
Okay. So when I get one, it's not like I'm going to see the string of the link. I'll just see maybe like a...
No, you can open it in Notepad and you can actually see what's in there. Basically, it's a saved search text file. that Adept can read and perform those searches just by double clicking on the file. It's
You would
nothing
get a
more-
link in your
it's-
email, and click on it, and then it would open up Adept and say, here's the files in that link.
Yeah, so if I say send to, and I pick an ALS file, so I'm going to send a link to an ALS file, and I'm going to pick myself as the email recipient. Is that who I'm logged in as?
No,
Nope. Okay. So
Can you make that box bigger?
can I make
Click the caret again to get back to that name. No, not this box. Hit the caret and make that box bigger.
yeah, but it looks like there's only one name in there for some reason.
Huh.
Let me do it from the desktop client. So I'm gonna select files. So I'm gonna go to Word, and search for everything that starts with 1. I'm gonna just pick these PDFs up here at the top. I'm gonna do a send to, and here I'm gonna send it links to an ALS file. I'm going to tell it that I want to put it on my desktop. I'll call this Todd. Say save. Okay. Okay, so that just created the ALS file on my desktop. If I go out here and open that with Notepad, so here's that Todd ALS somewhere out here on the desktop.
down. Bottom left.
Bottom left. Oh, here, yeah. If I right click on this and say open with, and I tell it to open with Notepad, I'm not going to always use that because I don't want to change the association. But if I open that with Notepad, here's all it is. It's just an Adept list. So it's only a text document. If I double click on that, I'm already logged into Adept, so I didn't have to log in, but there, it just brought me back the results out of what I sent. So that's what an ALS file is. It just is a search of a list file that you have. Now you can do whatever. You can check it out, check it in, view the files, assign them to people, whatever. Now over here in SolidWorks, when I do the send to, if I do that same thing with the ALS file, the only thing I can do is I can send it to, I can't send it to the desktop like I did there. So if I do links, I don't have an option here to save it as just a file. Instead, it's going to give me a file name and I have to send it to an email recipient. So if I want to get a copy of it, I would just type in my email address there. And in Outlook, then you would see an email come in with that ALS attached to it.
Right.
Okay. Okay, workflow, as I said, we're going to be talking about tomorrow. The workflow and the document dashboard we'll be talking about tomorrow. The other part that we'll also be talking about tomorrow will be the Adept relationship tree. So if I open a file here, that was a whole bunch of unresolved children here, so it's not going to open really good.
Donate.
Why isn't there an okay to all here?
The feature request.
Okay, so this is the Adept relationship tree, and we'll talk about that tomorrow as well.
All right.
So what we've covered today is how to search for files, how to open them, how to check them out, copy them out, make new files out of it, insert existing ones, replace files, all those things with the drag and drop features of the Adept task pane here. Any questions? I know we've had a lot of questions already, but any additional questions on any of that? Your brain's all full for the day?
Today.
I think so.
I'll say.
So Todd, you, me, and Brant need to get together but do you want to go get lunch first, or?
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll keep this meeting open, and if you want to go and get lunch and that stuff, you tell me when you want to. I'll just keep the meeting open. You'll join with the same meeting, and I don't know if Eric's there, if you want to get Eric involved in it, or.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm just gonna hit mute on the phone here, and then when we're back, we'll let you know.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording right now.
Sure.
And what we're doing this afternoon, if you want it recorded, I'll just include it on with this recording. If not, we'll just not record that part of it.